Welcome to the Non-Sequitur Show. Continual watching beyond this point may result in terminal face palming and a complete loss of wokeness. You have been warned.
Hey, welcome everybody. It is the NonSequitur Show, and it's an early edition. Usually we do it stream about 5 p.m. Pacific time, but we have a special guest today who's in the UK, and they're in a totally different time zone because the Earth is not flat, unfortunately. If it was, we'd all have a normal time. But unfortunately, we're on everybody's schedules. Let me introduce my co-host here, V. Welcome.
Hi,
V,
hello. I have T. I am never up in the AM. I usually don't get up until sometime after noon, so this is actually really good for me because I suffer from terrible sleep schedules.
She doesn't get up like 2 o'clock my time usually. You know, I'm having a coffee, and she got the cool background because mine broke, so whatever. So anyways, let's get it. You know, we're running a little bit late, so kind of let's get this started because I know Dr. Sijuwade probably has a full schedule today, and he was gracious enough to join us. So let me start this off by introducing our guest. First, Dr. Sijuwade is a professor, I think a lecturer, of School of Theology in London. Would that be the best way? A lecturer, visiting lecturer, if I remember.
Oh, he is muted.
Oh, he's muted.
It's not on my end.
From what I remember, he was a visiting lecturer at the London School of Theology, but he's got his PhD from the University of York. He writes papers on metaphysics, a topic that is very dear to my heart, and I've watched many of his videos talking about this topic with like Aaron Ra and other people, and I found him to be just, well, one, he's got a great accent, so everybody loves listening to him, but he knows his stuff, and it is a great topic. So I decided to reach out to him. He was gracious enough to come on and have a discussion with Dr. Majors, Jim Majors, the mustache, who his background is in Hebrew studies, but he knows about metaphysics as well. So I said, you know what? Let's get together and see if we can determine if God is a necessary being that required for some kind of metaphysical grounding for everything. What a topic. So anyways, first, let me Jim, how about you introduce yourself first, and we'll have Dr. Sijuwade take over because it was his paper that we read for this that kind of was very interesting to have this discussion.
Yeah, I was able to read Dr. Sijuwade's paper before this, and want to first of all thank you, Dr. Sijuwade, for doing this and working around these times and things like that. Because this is a really interesting conversation, and I'm sure that probably one of the main reasons that you took this new kind of spin on this on an old argument is just because the old one was just old. Like nobody likes talking about it. It's just tired of arguing it. But I think this is going to be a little bit of a change, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm Jim Majors. Have a PhD in Hebrew Bible. I specialize in Danielic literature, and yeah, that's about it.
All right. Well, and also, Jim is a personal friend of mine as well, so let's get that out of the way. So I automatically think he wins on everything. But anyways, we'll give Dr. Sijuwade a chance. But thank you, Dr. Sijuwade, for joining us again. Huge fan. So introduce yourself and kind of tell us what your paper was about, because it is an interesting kind of spin on like Swinburne and a few other things. So
yeah, thank you very much. So yes, sorry, before I was muted, I've got to get used to all of this technology now. I'm really bad. Yes, I'm a visiting lecturer at the London School of Theology. So as you can tell from my accent, I'm not in the US. I would love to be in the US. I'm in the UK. And yeah, so my main area of research is philosophy, so specifically philosophy of religion. So myself and other philosophers of religion, we focus on utilizing the tools and techniques of contemporary philosophy to help clarify and justify religious claims. So the specific religious claim that I was looking at in this paper was that there is a God, the claim that the massive big claim that there is a God, which obviously the majority of the religions are affirming that. You will have some religions that don't affirm the existence of God, but let's say we have Christianity, Judaism, Islam, they'll affirm that there is a God. And we would want to analyze that claim and say, what are the justificatory grounds for it? And I believed, and I was trying to argue for in this paper, that I think there are good grounds. So I'm using the word grounds. It's not going to be helpful because what we're trying to account for is grounding. But sorry for that. But yeah, there are good reasons to believe in God on the basis of some areas of metaphysics. So a lot of the time, as you were saying, Dr. Majors, there are arguments that have been put forward throughout the millennia arguing for God's existence. And a lot of it starts from physical phenomena. So you have the cosmological argument, looking at the cosmos, the universe, and saying, well, what's the best explanation for that? And you might have a deductive argument, let's say like the Kalam argument, where it's trying to say that the beginning of the universe requires a cause. Or you might have a teleological argument that says, well, the fine-tuning within the universe requires an explanation or an intelligent design or something like that. But the way that I try to sort of tackle it is not by looking specifically at physical phenomena, so what you'll study in sort of the realm of science, but actually what people have been theorizing about in the realm of metaphysics, which I think really is an untapped reservoir of I would say, phenomena that is being left unaccounted for. And we'll sort of see that as we walk through this paper, that I think a lot of philosophers do not think about what are the ultimate explanations for the things that they are taking to exist within the metaphysical realm. And so in this paper, I looked at the specific concept of grounding, which I will sort of unpack later on, but it's really taken a hold of a lot of philosophers' minds in the field of metaphysics. So you have a lot of leading philosophers who are thinking there is this relation that exists within reality, and it plays a very important role in structuring reality into layers. And the way that I was sort of going for with this argument, I was saying, okay, let's say that there is this relation. Let's say this relation exists and it plays a very important role. Then what is the reason for this relation existing at any point in time? And so I was trying to put forward an argument, and an abductive argument, which is an inference to the best explanation, saying that we have this phenomena, this relation of grounding, and what's the best explanation given certain criteria for this thing existing? So that specific paper, I looked at that, but this is sort of a sister paper of another paper I wrote called Fundamentality in the Existence of God, where the phenomena is not just a grounding relation, but it's also the existence of all non-fundamental entities. So if we have, let's say, all of reality, and reality is structured into layers, we have the relation of grounding, which I'm saying needs to be accounted for. So that's one phenomena. We also have all of the entities within each of those levels, which need to be accounted for as well. And I'm saying, according to a certain criteria, that God is the best explanation for that. And so that then provides us good evidence to say that actually there is a God, good reason from the realm of metaphysics to affirm the claim that there is a God.
Okay, so real quick, just to sort of clarify, the paper is an abductive argument, right? It's not a deductive proof that logically concludes by some structure of validity that there's a God, but it's basically we want to be able to explain certain things. We want an explanation of the totality of things, and your argument is that the best abductive argument is some kind of metaphysical being with agency that you're going to call a God. Correct. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, that's what I was trying to say. So there are different ways of arguing for God's existence, and some obviously are more successful than others. I'm not really in favor of deductive arguments, and as you see, I've utilized a lot of Swinburne's argumentation, and he's played a big role in sort of just my philosophical formation. And I think he's correct, because he would reject deductive arguments, just because I don't think you can deduce God's existence from the phenomena. I just don't think it works. I think there are better ways to argue for God's existence. And so that's why I am focusing in this paper and in other papers on putting forward an abductive argument. So really the best explanation being God,
There is something that chat just wants a little bit of clarification on is, are we defining God, and or which God are we talking about in this case?
Yes. So, I mean, the base claim is just that there is a God, but obviously you need to define what that is, because God can mean many things. And in the paper itself, I just take God to be so I use some technical terms, so I know your audience will want sort of further clarification, but maybe later on I can do that. But I'm just saying basically that I define God as something I call an omnipotence trope. So he's a trope, and I do need to define that later because a lot of people won't know what that is. But he's a trope, and this trope is unlimited in power. And given that he's unlimited in power, he has all of the other attributes that we normally predicate of God. So being omniscient, perfectly good, perfectly free, eternal, all those sort of things. So the claim that there is a God is reduced to this claim that there is a trope who is limitless in power. And that's the way that I sort of unpack. And I think by defining God in that way, it fulfills a criteria better for the phenomena that I'm trying to account for. Yeah.
Okay. So not a specific deity, but something that is necessary and something that has intentionality.
It sounds like a deity that
yeah.
most of the Abrahamic religions would agree with. So whether like Muslim, Christianity, or Judaism would agree with this sort of a definition.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I think
Go ahead, Jim, real quick.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying that. I don't. So what my definition I would say is like a philosophical clarification of what the major religions are affirming, because they're just affirming that there is a personal entity that is unlimited in power, knowledge, goodness, and all these sort of things. When we're sort of analyzing that with the lens of, I would say, philosophy, we can then say, well, philosophically, that means, and what I'm putting forward is that there is this unlimited, powerful trope. And that is what you get. That's what I would say the Islamic religion, Christian religion, Judaic religion will be affirming, but they wouldn't affirm it in that terminology because that's utilizing contemporary philosophical, let's say, speech and things like that to do that.
Jim?
So what sort of explanatory power would you say it had? Like what extent do you think that that your argument can go before it kind of has to turn like not vague, but you can't really pinpoint anything. What's staying in the net, so to speak.
Okay, so I mean given this understanding of God, and given that God is omnipotent, and this entails him being perfectly good. So perfect goodness is the key thing that allows us to account for things in reality. And this is not just in my own work. This will be seen in Swinburne's and other philosophers' work, that if we're going to have any explanatory power for the hypothesis that there is God, we need to know what God's intentions are. And so we need to know what type of thing he would bring about. Now, I'm taking God, as I said, to be an omnipotence trope. He's unlimited in power, but that entails him being perfectly good. And him being omniscient. So if he's omniscient, he's going to know of all the truth value of every moral proposition. So any proposition that's purporting a moral truth, he will know the truth value of it. And if he's perfectly good, he will only do good. And then given, for those who would end up reading the paper, there's something called the Diffusiveness Principle, which is an ancient principle that's found in the work of Plato, some of the medieval scholastics, and it's also found in some contemporary philosophers' work. So diffusiveness principle just says that goodness is diffusive of itself. So if something's good, it will manifest its goodness. So given that God is perfectly good, that means he will perform any good action if there is one. And given that goodness is diffusive of itself, that means it will bring about other good things. Then if existence is a good thing, which I think most people would affirm, the existence of something is good, maybe the type of existence might be different, but existence itself is a good thing, then that will entail, there'll be a logical entailment that God would bring about other things. And what that will then mean is that, yeah, sorry.
I was just asking, because you keep saying, good, and that he produces goodness, and because he's good, but I just keep, the same question keeps going over my mind. It's like, well, like what, like by what metric are you saying that this is good?
Okay, so All right, I'll unpack. I think it'll be helpful to unpack the definition of God and then how it leads to him having perfect goodness, which you will understand what I mean by perfect goodness. So God is omnipotent. That means he can perform any logically possible action. Given that he's omnipotent in that specific sense, that he can perform any logically possible action, he would also be perfectly free. That means he will not have any causal influence in his decision making. So anything that he sees in front of him, normally, let's say we take just a normal person. If I'm making a decision between, let's say, Brussels sprouts and a chocolate cake, when I'm making a decision here, there's going to be some causal influence on my decision making process. One of the causal influences will be desires. Let's say desires for something sweet. But reason would guide me to eat the thing that will further my health. So the Brussels sprouts will be the decision that reason will guide me to take. But my desires, which will have a causal influence on me, will lead me to go and want to take the chocolate cake. And so that's why I might end up eating the chocolate cake. But given that God is omnipotent,
so are you saying that? Are you saying it's the will of God that's because of the nature of God that God would always choose Brussels sprouts? Like, well, not even choose Brussels sprouts. He would just immediately just do it.
Oh, he would be compelled.
Yeah, so
God wouldn't have a choice in that case, right? Like, God wouldn't be able to choose
the Brussels sprouts won't be on the plate for God, I think. But it's just an example for us to understand it. But it's basically saying that God will choose what in line with reason. So he wouldn't choose in line with non-rational desires. So,
it doesn't sound like he has a choice though. Like, because he could choose to follow rational thought, or he could choose to not choose rational thought. But the fact that he can't choose an irrational thought, whether it's a good thing or not, I mean, it shows a lack of freedom. I'd say not more liberty.
It's deterministic.
Oh no, not at all. It's just that he would just have a more limited range of choices in that he'll only choose between good options. So, for example, let's say I'll just give an example for a human case to help people understand it. So we have this all the time. No, we have this all the time. We will have, let's say, I can give to Oxfam, or I can give Oxfam being a charity, or I can give to another charity. Those are two good actions, and I have a free will choice on which one I pick, but I can only choose between those two. That's still a choice, but the range is within good actions. So God would only have choices within the range of good actions. He wouldn't have choices in the range of things which are bad action, which will be things that are given by non-rational.
I wonder what other buttons were lit up on that control panel at headquarters when he was getting ready to flood the earth. He was like, what were the other options that he had to choose? Flood the earth.
Okay, so here's the question. Okay, so what you're saying, look, the way I look at it, look, I understand when we have a pluralism approach, there are two good charities. Both of them are good. Which one do you give to? That's been a long-standing thing in philosophy. But if God is all-knowing, he's going to know. Wouldn't he know the best benefit of what he would give the charity to for the most amount of good? He would know the greater good in that regard. So even if he has two choices, would he not know the greater good and is he beholden to that
assuming they're all equal, right? But can I also
so I mean
a little bit for a second? So
sorry, say that again.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to expound 1 second just for
perfect. Yes, please.
If you have because I'm having trouble, like, I understand what you're saying, and I think I kind of like that sort of direction for God. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know how well it will comport with a lot of biblical writings, but I think it makes sense as a definition for God on a whole. However, doesn't it become really problematic? Like, this has been explored in if anybody's familiar with the Avatar series, not the TV show, the games, where the virtues which you kind of unlock throughout the game are being being charitable is a virtue, and being whatever, honesty and stuff. Those are all virtues. Later on in the games, at one point, the virtues kind of get flipped on their head, where you are compelled to give to charity or give to someone the maximum amount of money that you have, or the maximum amount that you could possibly give to a person, you are required to do so. So it sounds to me like you would run into a problem that if God can only make the morally good best choice to we're limiting the amount that he would ever have to do. So if there was somebody who was praying, who was homeless, being like, God, please help me, God would be not only compelled to help that person, but to help them not in the most maximal way, but they would have to do the most moral thing. So I'm a little bit confused about how that would happen.
Right, because good exists on a scale for us, right? But maximal goodness is an absolute, and so there's only one choice to do absolute goodness.
Maximal goodness.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Dr. Sijuwade. How would God?
So I mean, the way it will be is that so perfect goodness will be defined in the way that I'm going with, and other philosophers like Swinburne and others take be. God is perfectly good in the sense that he would do a best action if there is one. And that's quite the important thing, that if there is one, he will do many good actions and he will do no bad actions. And so the understanding is that the best action would be what reason dictates at that point. But reason might not always dictate something. So, for example, like with that charity one, it could be that through better research, I realized that one charity is better than another. They're actually giving their money to the poor and not, pocketing it themselves. Then reason will dictate that I will go with the one over the other. But there might be some scenarios, and God will be presented with these scenarios. For example, should he create, 100 giraffes, or should he create 101 giraffes, or should he create, camels instead of giraffes? I mean, there'll be points where it's whichever one you pick is going to be a good action. It's not going to be better than the other. It could be that God has, let's say, creating giraffes. I don't know how you are with giraffes, but hopefully you believe giraffes are maybe less valuable than
too many giraffes would be really bad for their local flora and fauna.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that enough babies are born, that the lions get full off of eating some of the babies, so that some of the babies get to live.
I just don't understand. I don't think that quite answers the question. And because if you've got, let's take out the charity, the group, and say you've got a homeless person starving. If God is a maximally good being that has enough power to do whatever he wants, and he has to choose, he has no other choice but to do the best morally, rationally good thing, how could you possibly even have a homeless person to begin with?
The only conclusion is homelessness is maximal goodness.
In some case, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it's depend, because there'll be other things that are involved in that. So it's like if God has created a world where there is, for example, free will involved, and he has other ends that he's trying to meet, such as development of characters of certain individuals, then that will play a part in, is he going to help the homeless person directly, or is he going to utilize other human beings and through their free will, them helping a homeless person? But if he utilizes that second methodology, then it would be that the homeless person might go hungry because the person decides not to exercise their free will to help that person. So it's just depending upon how, what else is involved in the world that God actualizes. But I was for the argument,
but are you saying that God shucks his responsibilities and he micromanages it out to flawed humans and just hopes that they do the right thing?
Oh no, not at all, not at all. I mean, it's just simply the idea that if you are affirming free will, then it's logically necessarily the case that God cannot make people choose the good if he has given free will. So I mean, obviously, it's a argument needs to be given.
So there's a balance there.
But
you're talking about
not to get drawn off. The argument itself is not, and that's quite important for this. The argument itself is not predicated upon the type of world that God will create, because I'm not giving an argument for God creating our universe with the things within our universe. I'm saying whatever the universe could be like, God is the best explanation for any of these non-fundamental entities that are existing within reality. So what the argument doesn't even need to get into this problem, because
it's a different section.
Yeah, well, that was the point I was going to make. You're not arguing. You're not arguing that this is the explanation why God actualized of all possible worlds. He actualized this one. You're not arguing for that. You're saying of all the possible worlds, any way it could have been actualized, he's the best explanation for whatever way it could have been actualized. But isn't it that if that was the case though, and you do mention the Euphoto dilemma, so obviously there's a longstanding issue there. Was God beholden in some way to actualize things because of reasons, or those? Is it those reasons why he did it this particular way, or did he have choices on that?
Okay, so sorry, just to understand your point. So are you saying is God guided by external reasons? I'm just trying to
is he influenced? Yes, God influenced why he created this actualize of all possible worlds. Whatever possible world he decided to actualize. This is the one we're in. We're not, you and I, index skull. We're not in any other possible world. We can't be. I mean, some version of us are, but the self is in this one. Why did God put us in this particular actualized world from the greater good?
So
I think just like simplify what Steve said. I think what Steve's trying to say is, was God obligated to make the universe the way he did
for us?
Okay, so just again with the argument, I'm not necessarily saying this universe itself with all of its exact features were logically entailed by God. I'm just saying at a general level, whatever God creates, there is an obligation for him to bring about other entities that are non-fundamental, and for there to be a grounding relation between these entities. Because there's a reason I don't want to get into, because then there are other things that need to be taken into account. Why would God actualize this specific universe over another specific universe? I'm going at a higher level than that, metaphysically speaking, to say whatever reality is, even if we're talking about our universe or whatever other reality that there is, if there are any non-fundamental entities within that reality and they are grounded, then there needs to be a God. Then if you want to then start going more, let's say, detailed, you'll then have to say, well, what are God's other reasons for him bringing about this universe? And I don't think this universe itself, the actualization of this specific universe with all of its features, God wasn't necessitated to bring about the things that are existing within this universe. I do believe that anything existing external to God is logically necessitated by the nature that he exemplifies. Sorry, just to...
Wouldn't that lead to a modal collapse, though? If it's predicated on him being necessary, then wouldn't anything after that become modally dependent as being necessary?
Okay,
lead to modal collapse?
Good point. So there's a paper coming out that is the third one in this, where I look at modality in the existence of God, and basically I'm quite open towards a modal realist view. And I'm quite open to the viewpoint that there are other concrete worlds that are existing. And so
Lewis approach.
Yeah, so Lewis's, but it's a modified form of Lewis's. For anyone who's interested, though, I have, before that paper does come out, which could be a few weeks and months, there is a paper where I look at Lewis's stuff called The Metaphysics of Theism, which is on my academia profile. But anyways, I believe that God would... because of his goodness, he'll bring about all of the concrete worlds that exist. But where he has freedom, and this is where freedom then comes in, is for him to choose which specific world to actualize. So which specific world to actualize, that's where the freedom will come.
I get what you're saying.
I think the confusion is coming from of all of the choices of worlds that he could have possibly made, how the hell is this one the most morally good? Option.
What
were the other options?
But I would say this is not the best of all possible worlds, because I don't think there is a best of all possible worlds. I think because the problem that you have, I mean, with the giraffe example, or human, let's say the number of humans on the planet, let's say there could be an extensive space that we have where you can fill all humans into different planets and they can exist. Would 1,000 humans be fine, or 1,001 humans be the best possible world, or 1,002 humans, or this less evil, or this more evil? So for me, I think there is no best of all possible worlds. All I think that God does is that he actualizes a world within a set of good worlds. And for whatever reason, he chose this world over another world where there might be less amount of evil, or a little bit more.
Is there an argument to say that he chose more than one that's independent?
Sorry,
Jim?
Yeah, Jim can go. I was just being. I was.
No.
I was
Go ahead and finish that because I'm way back there.
Okay, I was just saying that is it, for all we know, is it not possible that God has more than one active universe? So he didn't just necessarily make this one. This is just the one we're experiencing.
Yeah, from modal realism, it has to be.
So yeah, I mean that's what I was saying with this paper that's coming out, where I'm saying that God actualized. Sorry, he brings about other possible worlds. We are one of the possible worlds within the pluriverse, so the infinite plurality of worlds. We are one of them. But there are other worlds.
You're talking about multiverse. Sort of.
Sorry.
I mean, if you thought of it like a set of all the possible worlds that could be good, so you have a set of all possible worlds that have some good, whatever goodness. It makes, to me, the best of all possible world doesn't make any sense either. I mean, because you'd always say, look, why did I stub my toe one time less than I did, or more than I did in my lifetime? Was there anything to be learned from this? What from natural evil? So you're saying that God has this whole set of good things that he could pick from. Why he does is God, but there's no one specific possible world that is the best out of all possible ones, because it's like asking what's the highest number.
Yes. That's exactly it. So I don't think there is that world that is maximally the best world.
How could you purport that with God also being all powerful?
Because the idea here is
and all loving.
Yeah. So I mean, as I defined omnipotence before, God can do anything logically possible, but it's not logically possible that there is a best of all possible worlds, because there isn't. There's just an infinitely ascending or whatever list of worlds, so there isn't the top one. Yeah,
we have a super chat real quick. Dave Dallafor, longtime supporter of the channel, $5. Will the horrors of Hoven be in IMAX? Is that a reference to what's that reference to?
Steve, look at our next episode is Cindy Lincoln. Steve.
Okay, yeah. Oh, that's gonna be good too. I've been talking to Cindy quite a bit. Wonderful woman, very, very nice. So yeah, it's gonna be a really good episode. Okay, thank you, Dave. Like I said, he's been a long time fan of the show. Go ahead, where you're at.
I think we should probably take a step back, because Jim is way back at the beginning, and he's probably somewhere where I am also.
We can keep going. I tried to hang on to it for too long and I lost it.
Oh, you gotta write it down.
No worries. So let's just bring it back a little bit back to the actual in your paper. If you want to talk about your ontological priority system, which by the way, I think you're right on. Okay. I don't have any issue the way you layer that. I don't know anybody that really would, unless you're talking to Arn, because whatever. But no, I think you laid it out very well, and I like the way you did. You pointed out for the irreflexivity and transitive properties. So kind of explain that for the audience why you started off in this top-down causational approach to get to this grounding level that is your foundation to say, okay, all this is supervening upon this, and this. God's explanation for the foundation. I think that's really key to the topic.
Yes. Okay. So the phenomena is situated within a specific view of reality, which is called the layered structure of reality. It's the idea that a lot of philosophers believe that reality isn't just flat. Let's say, horses, planets, cows. So I don't know, I'm talking about animals, humans, all these things are all in one level. What philosophers believe is that reality is structured hierarchically, where there are things which are less fundamental at the top, and as you descend down the levels, you get to the more fundamental things in reality. So in that paper, I give an example of, let's say you're just talking about a human being, okay, and you're talking about, let's say, economics. So the category of economics will be at the top. So you have economical theories about goods and services. Now, those things are dependent upon the human mind, which is more fundamental than those theories, in that without the human mind, you wouldn't have those theories. But then the human mind, let's say you assume something like physicalism, the human mind is grounded in the human brain, okay? You wouldn't have the mind without the brain. But then the human brain is grounded in something more fundamental than that, which are, let's say, the chemical structure of the human being. But then the chemical structure of the human being is then grounded in something more fundamental, which will be things, let's say, like quarks or something like that. So what you have in reality, and we're just talking about human being, I've just taken one example, you can see anything that exists. There would be this structure of reality where as you descend more down the levels of this structure, you get from the less fundamental to the more fundamental. And really what's at the bottom level of this structure is what we will call the absolute fundamental entity or entities. So it might be more than one. But these are the things that are not grounded or dependent upon anything else. Everything else is ultimately, at a fundamental level, grounded upon these things. That doesn't mean that they're directly grounded. So economical theories aren't dependent directly on quarks, but they are in a, let's say, in indirect sense, because they're grounded by something else, which is grounded by that, and then you get down to the quarks. So the world and everything, not just the world, the universe, anything that exists is structured in this specific way, with the less fundamental at the top and the more fundamental at the bottom. Now, there are then two phenomena, which I was saying at the beginning, that I believe needs to be accounted for. The question is, why are there any of these entities within this structure of reality? So the theories, the brain, the human, and all these sort of things. And why is there this grounding relation, this relation that ties all of these entities together? And so metaphysicians have sort of come to the position that there are these things existing, but a lot of them would just say the explanatory stopping point stopped there. They just exist and it's just like that. Or some of them would put forward further metaphysical theories to say, actually, there is something else that accounts for them. And I'm doing that latter move. I'm saying, actually, there is something even more fundamental. The absolute fundamental entity is not, for example, the quarks. It's something that's even more fundamental, which grounds them, which I say is God. And the reason I can make that move is by adopting a certain criteria. Because if we're going to account for phenomena, we need to say, well, what are we going to account for the phenomena according to? There has to be some sort of criteria. And so the criteria that I assume is a criteria which I believe is found within other fields. So it's not a ad hoc move to say, argue for God, but it's just simply 4 components. And I'll just run through it quickly. So any explanation of something else, of a given phenomena, should firstly fit with the criterion of predictive power. That means that if the explanation is true, then it should lead us to expect the evidence that we have, the phenomena that we see or are postulating. We should expect that. It should explain. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it should predict it in the sense that we need to discover it later than we postulate the hypothesis. But it's the idea that there should be an explanatory connection between the explanation and the hypothesis. The explanation and the phenomena. So given the explanation, you should expect the phenomena. That's the criterion of predictive power. The second one is a criterion of background knowledge. That is that any explanation that's true should fit with other things that we take within our background knowledge to be true. So it should not just be some crazy idea that we just bring in, but it should actually mesh well with our background knowledge. The third one is the criterion of scope. Now, this one is not important, and it does drop out, I think, when we're looking at fundamental things in metaphysics. But you can utilize this in other areas. This is the criterion of scope, that the narrower the scope of an explanation, the more likely it is true. That means the less that it tries to explain, the more likely it's going to be true, because it has less to account for. But why that's not important in this specific context is because we're talking about fundamental explanations. We're talking about things that are trying to account for everything else that exists within the layered structure of reality. So the scope is going to be extraordinarily large for every explanation that you put forward. So it's not important. Sorry, just the last one, because I've been talking for a while. The last one is the criterion of simplicity. This is the idea that an explanation is more true if it is one that's quantitatively and qualitatively simple. Quantitatively in the sense that it postulates the fewest number of entities, and qualitatively in that it postulates the fewest properties of those entities. It postulates the fewest kinds that the entities exemplifies or falls into. And so the idea here is that it should postulate the fewest things. But the important modification that I make here, and this is in line with a metaphysician called Jonathan Schaffer, who plays a big role in this paper. But just for your viewers, he has nothing to do with theology. So what he says is not just theological people bringing in their own views. But what he says is that when we are looking at the criterion of simplicity, we should be talking about fundamental entities. So Occam's razor, and he renames it the laser for the 21st century. The laser is the idea that we should postulate the fewest fundamental entities, the fewest fundamental kinds of entities, the fewest fundamental properties of those entities. So the criterion of simplicity is applicable at the fundamental level. So just putting that all in sort of a summary slogan, the best explanation for the phenomena that we're putting forward is one that is the simplest explanation that fits with our background knowledge, that leads us to expect the existence of the non-fundamental entities and the grounding relation, when otherwise these things would not be expected to exist. So whatever does that is the one that we should say is the absolutely fundamental entity. And then I'm sort of arguing that I believe God is the best individual that fits that category.
All right, Jim.
So it kind of seems like God is just like fit into this category, because you're giving these characteristics and these achievements of God, that these fulfillments, and how he matches it up perfectly, and it sounds too good to be true. And then you realize it's like, well, yeah, this isn't just a basic God. You're throwing additional things on there. So I mean, before you get into all the details and everything, what are the minimal values of God? Like what is basic God? Like what is God's triangle, so to speak? Where does true God lie, and then where do the details go? There has to be some sort of a consistency in order for us to be able to say, yes, he's good. In order for us to make this choice that we believe is leading to moral perfection, or it's indicative of perfection, and it end up not being. So I mean, is God good, or is that just something that he could be?
I mean, so the way I define God, as I was saying before, is he is an omnipotence trope. So I think understanding what that is will help maybe clarify what I'm trying to argue for. So saying that God is an omnipotence trope, firstly, he's a trope. Tropes are entities which are postulated by a lot of philosophers. They would take them within metaphysics to be playing fundamental roles in various areas. And so I identify God as a trope. Now, tropes, for those who know of them, they will normally they're conceived of as properties. So some people might be saying, well, am I saying God is a property? Like, can't really see it properly, but this is a blue jumper. Is God like blueness or something like that? But
he's
I'm not saying
200
that because...
square foot house on a ranch with...
Yeah.
He has to be at least metaphysically necessary. He has to at least have necessity.
Yeah, so I mean, you get that from once the unpacking happens. So you have God being a trope. He's a certain type of trope called a module trope. Module tropes are objects. So he's a certain type of trope. And tropes are also understood to have powers. So the postulation of God being an omnipotence trope is not ad hoc, because tropes are taken
understood by who, and what do you mean by powers? I don't like that. So that's not a philosophical term I'm familiar with.
No. So a lot of philosophers will take properties, so just say properties generally, to be powerful. What that means is that they can manifest and they can stand in certain causal relations. So, for example, let's say I have a property of blueness, like I said here. It's powerful in the sense that it can manifest its color, and that's why I can see it. So they have certain powers. So tropes are tropes, but in general.
So
yeah.
Well, real quick, so we can break down for the audience.
Blue something you can't use blue to blue something.
Well, but if I'm not mistaken, you're trying to use them as universals, some kind of universals that exist as far as actual properties that exist.
Well, he's also trying to say that he interacts with reality, with the material world.
Yeah. So what I was saying, no, I wouldn't just Steve. I wouldn't say that it's a universal. Universals are different entities from tropes. So universals are entities that are
Okay.
numerically identical, then they're causally inert. But
Mhm.
tropes are things which are properties or objects that can stand
That
in
can
causal
interact.
relation with other entities.
Okay.
Yeah. So the
Okay.
reason I can see the color in front of me is because of the trope that's being exemplified by that object, which is standing in a causal relation with my vision.
Is
So
that like a
the
type
idea here
token
is
thing?
that, sorry.
Type token?
Yeah. So
but still, no matter what it is, I mean, still what you're doing is you're presenting us with this concept of God, and then telling us who he is, telling us how he fits these things. But how do we know that he does indeed fit these things? Like, through what means are you able to verify that he fits all of these necessary holes?
Yeah, so I mean, what I've done at the beginning. So what you have to understand is when you're putting forward an abductive argument, you're saying you're putting forward an explanation, and if the explanation fulfills the criteria that we are operating under, and it best explains the data, then you have grounds for the existence of that thing and it existing in that specific way.
Yeah,
So
it's
obviously
like
you have to come up with
proposition,
it.
explanation,
But-
explanation justifies proposition.
But
Yeah, so
Right.
you have yeah, so you have to
like
evidence.
yeah. Like, for example, like the claim God is good, or God does goodness. What, like, how do we see that? How do we verify that?
Yeah, I think what Jim is saying is that he's in the section of like, okay, so proposition is God is good. Here's the explanation as to why he fits here. However, how is he then the best explanation for what we're seeing?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean,
and how do we know that? Like, how do we know that God's not a con artist?
No. So he's the best explanation for what we are postulating or trying to explain, because he fulfills the criteria. Whatever fulfills the criteria is taken to be the best explanation. If there is another explanation that's put forward, then that will be taken to be the best explanation. But why God has goodness, so to answer your question, is because I was saying to you before, it's entailed by his omnipotence. So, and I was telling you that goodness, because I was trying to tell you at the beginning, goodness is defined as doing the best action, doing any good action that there is, and then doing no bad actions. That's entailed by his omnipotence. And I was trying to say to you, because God is perfectly free, and I think we went off with that perfect freedom thing, trying to understand what that is. But I was saying the definition that I'm going with is he's free in the sense that he has no causal influences that play a part in his decision-making process. So that's the freedom. So even if you don't like the idea of freedom, and you're saying it's a maybe it's not the best form of freedom, it's not libertarian.
I do.
Yeah. I'm just saying
I like it. I'm just saying that the way that it is, with God having the freedom and the authority, it makes it really difficult for you or I to determine what is good or bad, other than just saying, oh well, God's doing it, so must be good.
Well, I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken,
there is no metric,
That's
there's no
the next
standard.
Step of the conversation, right? When you start to define which God you're talking about, and you start looking at biblical records, particularly because Jim is a biblical scholar.
Well, no, any God. But he's already claimed that this God does perfect goodness. He's already made that claim, but all he's doing is presenting us with a blank God, and then these descriptions.
Jim,
but with no justification for the descriptions.
Isn't it kind of implied that if we're talking about a moral grounding, right? Because a lot of this comes from morality, right? And I do believe that I'm a more realist, so I do believe that actually there are normative facts that do exist. There are moral facts that are objective. Sure. So we're talking about a grounding for this. We as people want to do, I think, right. I think if not, why would we have moral theory if not to tell us, what the best course of action, what to appeal to? And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Sijuwade, you're just basically saying that if we have to have some kind of foundation for morality, right, as far as where do these moral facts come from, how do we even come to apprehend them? They come from a grounding of a morally good being, so we can know the right or wrong, something along those lines.
Well, I'd be
curious. How do we know he's a morally good being?
Iron made a good point in the chat saying
but that's the thing, Steve, is that's the problem, is you're presuming that he's a good being. You're presuming it.
Do you have reason to believe that he was not?
Would it be possible then,
I mean,
No,
well,
so
that's
would it
something
be
that actually Iron Chariot brought up in the chat.
even
It's a really good point. They said that
even if I didn't, there's no reason for me to assert it.
if God is omnipotent, then he or she or it would have to know all of the evil as well. So if God is locked into making the good decision every single time, they would still have to know about whatever the evil is. Like, right? That would
Well,
that
and
would
yeah,
be hard, right?
of course.
Yeah. No, but that wouldn't be a problem. I would affirm that. But okay.
So it's just like,
my issue
how
is,
do we
it's
know
not, I'm not,
what is actually locking God into this box of having to do this good thing? And I think what you're saying is that the explanation of that, because of what the world we live in and because of what we're looking at and what you're purporting is God has to be locked into this, right? So like your proposition is God is locked into us. Here's the explanation as to why God is locked into us. Therefore, God is locked into this, right? Proposition, explanation justifies the proposition.
Yeah, I mean, it might be taken that way, but my main issue is not to argue for the goodness of God. I can lose the word goodness. All I'm saying is, given his omnipotence, God would do the best action if there is one, and he will do many actions which are less than the best. Okay, so because there is no best, but they are not taken to be bad actions. What that bad action being, you'll just say, let's say, a morally, wrong action. So all I'm saying is that I'm not defining God as good. I'm just saying using the term good is defined as he would follow what reason dictates. Reason dictates to actualize something over another thing, then God would do that. We are not like that in that we do not always follow reason. A lot of the time we do, and we try to, but then we have causal influences that push us away to something else.
And
so
a
we
lot
don't
of the
always follow reason.
time, and a lot of the time we don't, because we would find it morally reprehensible to do so.
Well,
to follow reason.
Would you?
Oh yeah, there are certainly times where it's more reasonable to do something or not do something, but we will not choose to do something or to do something in a what would be a more moral choice.
Yeah.
Or what we would use more moral.
So would you say, well, what is the more moral choice during a disaster? Praying for them or sending supplies?
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said. Can you just repeat it?
Which is the more moral decision for helping people in a disaster? Praying for them or sending supplies?
I would say doing both. I don't know if it's either or. Pray and send the supplies.
But you go to a pluralist
but only one of them rationally is the better option.
I mean, if you're taking it that it's a binary option, that binary choice that you can only choose one or the other, then it'll obviously be go and
no, there can be other choices. I mean, but would you pick praying over any of them?
Sorry, would you pick?
But there can be other choices. That's fine. But would you pick praying? As long as praying is one of them, would you pick praying as the most moral good?
Well, I mean, it depends the example. But if it's a disaster scenario, you would go and say, go and help the person in need. Because anyway, I don't think prayer is always going to be that you sit down in your house and you just say a prayer and then you say, God, do the business for me. No, it's God is saying he's utilizing you to do what to further the good. And that would be to go and help the people. So, but again, I think this is not wholly important for the argument because it's a metaphysical argument. It's not saying the world that God has.
We're kind of getting into more into the norm. Yeah, it's probably evil.
Doesn't play any role in this argument.
I think it's more of like a question of, again, what are you using to, because I know you've given your proposition, the explanation, and the explanation justifies the proposition, but I think what me and Jim are both kind of where we're at is that we're not seeing how the explanation is actually justifying the proposition in this case, because the only example we have is the world we live in, and the world we live in does not seem to purport with the proposition.
Yeah. So what I would then say just simply is that there's you need to then counter outside of, let's say, an a posteriori approach, which is saying, well, look at our world. Is it a good world or not? You have to go and say, well, this is an a priori stage where we're saying this is the definition of God. And given this definition of God, we will have certain characteristics being logically entailed. If God has these logically entailed characteristics, then he will necessarily operate in a certain way. Him necessarily operating in a certain way is bringing about non-fundamental entities in the grounding relation. It could be, by the way, this argument is not saying that God is going to bring about a good, a world which is, the best world. All it's saying at this point is that God is going to bring about something else, whatever that is. So whatever it is, God is going to be the source of that thing. It could be then when you take.
So how do you?
Sorry?
I mean, yeah, that's kind of like post hoc, isn't it?
Why would it be?
I mean, because it sounds like you're. I don't know. It sounds like you're just like throwing up hula hoops while people are throwing a ball back and forth, and then every now and then a ball goes through, and you said, "Oh, I meant to do that."
Well, okay. So let's try this. Let's try this real quick. So to kind of bring it back. Plus, we have some super chats that we'll be reading here in a second. And I apologize for the little noise out there. But okay, so Jim, he's arguing for a necessary being, right? Which again, from an abductive point of view, which is perfectly possible. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to discount that a necessary being is not possible, whether they accept that or not, or some other explanation like a brute fact or like an infinitism or something like that. Let's put it on you for a second. Do you accept that a necessary being exists? Because whether it has intentionality or agency or not, just some necessary being that must be the foundation. Yes, that's the foundation for an explanatory power.
I accept that it's possible that there's a foundation. I also believe that it's possible that there isn't one.
But then, sorry,
yeah, he's agnostic on it.
Yeah, well,
but then
I mean, I have no idea. I don't think that anybody has enough information to go beyond, just causal relations. I don't think anybody has any justification saying, "Boop, stops here."
No, but I think you would, because there has to be an explanatory stopping point somewhere. But the question is that
sure, yeah, obviously there has to be an end to space, but you don't know where it's at.
No, but if you're assuming this, so we're not talking about the physical realm, we're talking about this layered structure. If there is a layered structure,
right?
What is at the bottom of that structure? That would be my question.
What's the base level? Yeah, what's the base level?
Yeah, what will be at the bottom then?
It's sigil.
Unless
what's at the bottom of infinity?
No, so are you saying
that'd be infinitism.
I'm saying that is possible. I'm saying that it's possible that there is a layer upon all of those others, all the rest of the stack is on top of. But I'm also saying that there's no reason to suggest that at the bottom of that stack is somebody who loves me and wants me to be with them for eternity and thinks I'm a sinner and all these other things that.
But that's so
I have no business.
I think though,
it's like
it's just
applying onto it. Okay. Not even that. Let's just say a personal God who loves me and wants the best for me. How about that?
How about just a necessary being that just get to that first rung. I mean, do you?
Okay, then we need to do away with the talk of goodness of all that. We need to do away with all of those claims.
But do you tend more to, if I can ask, do you tend more to a necessary being or brute fact or an infinite regress? What do you have a tendency to go to one of them? I mean, those are the only three options I can think of. If there's any more, please let me know.
I honestly don't know. I think I guess I lean about 50-50 in between infinite regress and some Probably brute fact. I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I don't fucking know.
Yeah, gotcha. But then what I try and do in the paper is I try and say, well, these are the options that metaphysicians go with. They either go with the brute fact approach and just say the grounding relation
and I tend to that.
Has no other ground, and the non-fundamental entities, maybe they're just, they don't have a further ground for it. Or there are other options on the table. So Schaffer takes the view that the totality of reality, the universe, is the thing which is the fundamental entity. So he puts forward an idea called priority monism, which is the idea that the universe is the fundamental thing. But then there are other philosophers who believe it's the little bits and pieces of reality. So it's called priority pluralism, where all the little bits and pieces of reality are the fundamental things that make up everything else.
More than the sum of its parts, right?
Right.
Sorry.
The sum of its parts. So
Yeah.
all
So
together makes
I mean,
if you were to assign a percentage of like conviction or like confidence in God being that foundation, what would you say it was, like with all other possibilities
well, I'm saying
considered?
I'm saying with this argument, it's the only one I can really go with is the definition of God that I've gone with, because if you look at the argument and we take the criteria, if you take the criteria, there is nothing that best fulfills the criteria than God, because the way I define God is as an omnipotence trope, as I said. He's metaphysically simple.
That's how you define God. But that's not how God has been demonstrated.
So I mean, we're all working with definitions. So you would need to account for. You will need to account for.
Well, sure, yeah. But I mean, but essentially, the reader has to concede your presuppositions about God.
But that's why I want to see the objections to that specific presupposition, because what I put forward is just the idea that there's a trope. Metaphysicians take the existence of these things to be true. So I'm not defining God as a spirit, an unembodied person, or all those sort of things. I'm taking to be a trope, which is accepted within the wider field of metaphysics. I'm taking him to be a powerful trope, which again is accepted in the wider field of metaphysics. All I'm saying is that the power that he has doesn't have limitations. So the power that another trope might have will have certain finite limitations. His doesn't. And so at the base level, I don't see what I've done that is problematic.
Yeah,
so
I think
I don't know why. And I'm saying to you, from him being omnipotent, you then get him being perfectly free. You get him having
those
knowledge
they follow out for each other.
But you could say like literally anything else though. If you replace God with flying spaghetti monster, and the flying spaghetti monster has these properties and fulfills these properties, then it's
that won't be a different hypothesis. Just change the name. It won't be a different explanation.
What is deciding that the flying spaghetti monster has these properties or God has these properties? We are.
It's the evidence, right? It's the evidence. So because it's an A+.
But if I say the flying spaghetti monster is omnipotent,
like I mean, how do you how do you establish provenance from the goodness back to God? How do you? Where's that rope? Where's that link?
What do you mean providence? Him being in control of,
right? Like how do you associate a goodness with God? Whenever you see goodness being done, how do you know that it's God? Is it just because you think that it's goodness that it has to be God, or is there a logical, rational approach and an abductive clue that you can associate that with?
I mean, I don't have an answer to that, because the thing is, it's not the phenomena that's been looked at. The phenomena that's been looked at is just saying the existence of non-fundamental entities and the existence of the relation of grounding. So the argument is not trying to argue for the goodness of entities within, reality. It's trying to say there are these two phenomena. These two phenomena that are taken to be things which are affirmed by metaphysicians working in the field of contemporary metaphysics. What best accounts for it? Now, sorry, just with your point you said at the beginning about the flying spaghetti monster, it is, as you were saying, Steve, it's a semantical issue. It doesn't actually put forward another explanation. Right, or just renaming whatever we're calling God, which I'm saying is an omnipotence trope, as a flying spaghetti monster.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that I'm putting
argument.
It's the
same. That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying that doesn't change your argument, and because that doesn't change your argument, you run into problems down the line, which is I think what Steve was saying and what Jim was saying is, and these are issues that come down the line, not necessarily with the paper itself or your specific argument.
Right.
Because now if you try to take this and say, okay, it's God, and now we're going to say it's this God, because God has a lot of connotations, has a lot of baggage with it. You'd almost be better off to say a being at the bottom instead of a God specifically, because of this baggage.
And there can be a being that fulfills your criteria, but isn't omnipotent.
Okay, but then but then you'll need to explain it for me. So if you put forward that hypothesis, we'll then assess it with the hypothesis I put forward. Because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm saying, okay, fair enough. If there is, change the word. Don't even use the word God. Just say, my explanation is there is an omnipotence trope that is the fundamental entity that brings about all non-fundamental entities and the relation of grounding. Omnipotence trope. You don't have to call it God.
To be clear, are you making the claim that this figure is omnipotent, is all powerful?
Yeah, yes, I did say that. It's part of the definition. So he's an omnipotent. He is an omnipotence trope.
Okay. So
yes.
so what is it about the any of the four criteria that you gave, the predictive power, the background knowledge, scope, and simplicity? Which one of those is incompatible with something that isn't all powerful?
Because you wouldn't have predictive power, so you'll lose predictive power. You won't lose background knowledge unless you're saying it doesn't have power at all. So you'll lose predictive
Isaiah
power.
Omnipotent?
Sorry,
was Isaiah omnipotent?
I doubt that.
Would you say that he had predictive power?
But you're using predictive power the wrong way. So that's not the correct way to understand it. I'm not talking about predicting things that are going to occur in the future. And I did say that before. I said providing a sufficient explanation for the data. So when I'm saying if you are putting forward an explanation that is not omnipotent, then it's not going to explain the data very well. It wouldn't lead us to expect there to be a grounding relation and there be non-fundamental entities. So I'm saying you have to put something
rationalization.
Sorry.
So it kind of sounds like you're saying post hoc rationalization is what you mean by predictive power, like the appearance of predictive power.
Okay, I can change words if they're problematic, but they're all semantical. At the moment, they're all semantic arguments because you can change
when is the prediction being made?
Lose predictive power and say explanatory power.
Okay. Yeah, you're
explanatory power. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
so
right. Whatever. I guess those are two very different. Different.
Yeah,
no, it's not predictive in the literature. Predictive power and explanatory power are just synonyms.
They mean the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't.
See the problem.
Okay. Well, I'm not a philosophy guy, so I know
the problem we're running into.
Hang on, terms are
Jim. The problem we're running into is that these words are used in different domains of discourse differently. And in science, we were talking about predictability. It means a very different thing. And it's a problem with philosophy. And I do criticize philosophy. That makes some of these words, they are used in a very different connotative way.
Burden of proof is one of them that we run into all the time.
Yeah,
having a problem where it actually just means burden of.
So, but yeah,
but it's like, what does background knowledge mean? Like,
I mean, background knowledge is Sorry, Steve.
No, go ahead. No, good.
I was just saying.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, I was just saying it's just the idea that the explanation needs to fit with other things that we take to exist. So, for example, if I'm putting forward the idea of a fairy, explaining the data, or a ghost. I mean, we do this all the time. If I hear my door slam in my house, and I'm saying, what's the explanation?
For a second, I thought you said furry.
Furry. Sorry, maybe it's my accent.
They need
furry.
Furries need explaining. There has to be some kind of principle sufficient reason for
God
furries.
is a furry. We've already confirmed this.
So
he created the best possible world that he could, which wasn't the highest, but he created the one that he could that was the most good, and the most good world that we're living in has furries in it. Therefore, God is a furry. Confirmed.
Clearly not the best possible.
So
metaphysically confirmed.
So folk concepts can become scientific explanatory tools.
No. I was just saying, with that example, I was trying to say to you, if I hear a door in my house slam and I'm trying to come up with an explanation for it, and I go into my room and I see the window open, the best explanation, the simplest explanation that leads me to expect the data would be that it was the wind that slammed it. But someone could easily say, well, actually, maybe it was a ghost. And the ghost is the thing that did it. So don't worry about the window. But how you will then say no, more than likely it's not, is because ghosts do not fit with our background knowledge about things that exist within reality. So background knowledge plays a part in us deciphering between certain explanations.
That's exactly how I feel about God.
Yeah, maybe,
especially for an abductive.
I know
But
I'm
especially for an
confused.
abductive argument.
I think
but that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. But you have to go with the definition I've given, because all I'm saying, and I'm saying lose the word God.
That's fine.
I'm saying there is a trope the concept is something that's accepted widely in philosophy, and this trope is limitless in power. That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying, given that thing that I'm postulating, we have an account for all of these things that we're trying to account for. So I'm saying you then will need to bring another hypothesis that better fulfills the criteria. And I would like to see that, because it won't. Yeah.
Just as long as you're not like trying to assigning any moral judgments or value judgments or anything like that.
It sounds like the morality of God in this case is being removed and not quite replaced, but explained better with the most rational, the most logically sound is what God is going to do. And so you end up with a world like ours with the problem of evil and such, because whatever is good to God isn't necessarily whatever we value as morally good, and therefore he's just picking the most rational thing, and maybe the most rational thing is there's a homeless person.
So does that mean that God is like a utilitarian, or he reads John Locke?
Oh no.
No.
So
I don't think so. But what I would say is that I'm saying,
if we're talking about like rationality instead of like divine will, I mean, I guess you could say that they're same. But when I think divine will, I don't think rationality. I mean,
that's a problem with assigning the name God to it. Is you get all this additional baggage that comes with it when that's not necessarily the argument being made.
But you're also saying that rationality is something that kind of exists independent of of the
rationality exists before God. So God exists within the
just the authority that we give it. I mean, without us, it's nothing.
Okay, so let me ask. So I think it is kind of critical, and I think Dr. Sijuwade wants an answer to this question. If you have a different abductive argument for the explanation of all things, and if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you're taking a very fundamentality, where you have something very basic, very primitive, right? Because I do believe in primitives. I think that I tend to mereological nihilism.
I do too.
What do I know? Yeah, I like mereological nihilism. But I mean, I think that if we're going to talk about a grounding, there has to be something so basic that be the foundation of the fundamentality, that he's arguing that it is a necessary being with the omnitrope and all these other things. And I think he asked you before, do you have any other abductive argument to say this is the grounding we should have for the explanation for fundamentality?
I don't think that I can say this is where we should put the grounding. That's my whole thing, is like I don't think anybody should be saying this is where we should put it, because we don't know. There's so much that we don't know. We are just so ignorant. I really think people are going to be looking back at people talking about ultimate foundations of the universe and then look at the people who just wouldn't postulate anything prior to the Big Bang, and be like, these guys, they were dumb too, but at least they weren't like, just making stuff up or like.
So you don't believe the universe has an explanation.
Not making stuff up, but making unjustified leaps in logic.
So you hold that there is no explanation for anything. I mean, obviously, I think a lot of your argument goes from that it has to be some form of principle sufficient reason. But Jim, you're saying that there's just no explanation for anything. There's no foundation for anything. It's just an infinite regress of epistemic justifications, and infinite regress of causality.
No, he's saying that he doesn't see that how you are justified in making the initial assumption to begin with. So it's like saying that, hey, your argument is good and it makes sense. Right. However, he is not convinced by the assumption out the gate and says that he's saying that you cannot be conclusive off of that assumption because he's not seeing the justification for it in the first place.
Right. Because causal events still occur. Like whether or not, whether or not God is, the ultimate foundation of everything, whatever it is, it's irrelevant to. It's irrelevant right now because we don't know. All we can do is make an assertion, but it doesn't affect the way that we live our lives. Whenever I cross the street, I still look both ways. I don't think, oh man, gosh,
it's
that's
not
my ultimate foundation. I can't do this.
Yeah, that's pragmatics. Exactly.
Yeah, he's talking
that's
about
pragmatics.
pragmatism. Yeah.
Dewey.
Well, I think this is the thing that people get lost
It's the
in.
ultimate foundation for everything. Pragmatics or not, it's everything.
Well, I think
That's not a grounding, though.
Well, no, I think Jim's making a different point. Jim is basically saying this is why people get lost in the weeds a lot when it comes to philosophy, is that how does this even apply to anything, and why does it matter? And I think that's a fair question.
Especially when it comes to God, because when we're talking about a God that interacts with us in the real world, how can we only have just this vague metaphysical description to go off of it's supposed to be good evidence of its existence, of a God that's usually postulated to interact with the material world? It doesn't seem enough. It's like,
this is the
it's
why use God as the name, and you'd be better off with like a being.
Okay.
But sorry, go ahead.
It's like asking your woman for nudes, and then she messages you with just like a stick figure drawing, and
that sounds like you speak from experience there. Jim, Dr. Sijuwade, go ahead.
Maybe the other way around.
But I think it is fair to ask of philosophy when you get into these things, is like, how is this applicable? And I think that's a great question.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
no,
of course.
Yeah, no, it is. But then you have to look at what the nature of the subject is, and the nature of the subject of metaphysics is to investigate the fundamental structure of reality, because we don't have the same attitude towards fundamental physics. We're not saying to people who are theoretical physicists, what are you doing here? You're talking about ultimate, reality and all these sort of physical reality and cosmology. No, we don't care about that. That doesn't apply to my life for helping old ladies across the street. So why are you doing that physics? Of course we're not doing that. It's the domain of study that you're looking at, and then you have to say, is there justification for that domain of study? There is justification for theoretical physics, because we have a desire to understand about the fundamental physical reality, and there is reason also to do metaphysics because we want to understand something even deeper, the fundamental structure of all reality.
Can
and so
we
would even say even to do physics, which we say is of great importance in 21st century contemporary society, you have to also have a metaphysical framework within you work and operate within. So
absolutely,
I don't think the argument works here, because you're bringing in a desire for something that doesn't apply to the domain of study. The domain of study saying, what is the fundamental structure of reality,
right,
and what are the entities that exist within that? And what I'm trying to say to you is here, I want a better explanation than what I've given. So unless you have a problem with the criteria and say the criteria is just not correct,
that's not how it works, though. Like, if I have a problem, hang on, just 1 second, Dr. Sijuwade. If you and I walked into a university classroom and they had an old school green chalkboard and they had this huge equation on there and it's been up there for a long time, people have been trying to solve it, and you walk up there and you stick your muffin from breakfast against the chalkboard and you leave it sticking there, you said, solved it, prove me, like, show me a better answer than that. Like, I don't have to show a better answer, because like, you're just making an assertion. This is just a muffin. Like, you're not showing us why this answer is right. You're not showing us the proof in your work. You're not showing your work.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you, I don't think that example even works with this, because what I'm saying to you is, this is a live field of research, grounding relations, fundamentality. People who have nothing.
Who's at the front? Who's at the front line of that? Like who's working at the grounding part? Like who's at that level?
So what do you mean? Are you saying people? Sorry, names of people.
Well, yeah, because like you gotta have like somebody like down there, like where the grounding occurs. Like.
No. So what
I think
what I'm trying to say
has gotten lost in the pragmatism.
Yeah, no. What I'm trying to say to you is, this is a live area of research. Metaphysics is at the center of philosophy and is also, I would say, a presupposition of our physical sciences. And so it is an area that people are looking at, and they are putting forward explanations for absolutely fundamental entities. And so I'm saying to you that in order for this argument to be shown to be erroneous, you need to either say, my criteria that I put forward is problematic. The phenomena doesn't exist. So you're trying to account for something which is just, it's not there. Or you'll have to go and say that there is a better explanation of the criteria. Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say to you is, if you want to look at this phenomena, you will need to go and then say, what's the best explanation for it? Either it's a brute fact and it just exists, or there is an external grounding of it. And I'm trying to say,
okay, but
I'm a little bit confused in one spot because I'm pretty sure.
Wait, but hang on. There's a difference between saying, this one might be right, but I'm still going to keep looking, and then saying, no, this one's right. I think this one's right. I don't think that there's any other answer out there that's better than this one.
No. I don't. So I'm not making that assertion without argument. So I'm saying in the paper itself, I spend pages and pages and pages.
Yeah, no, it's well written.
Right.
Let me see if I can.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like Swinburne. Like you went down the same route that he did. Where I mean, I did like your paper, but it just in the end, like it still felt like you were like holding on to that as like the most valid.
I mean, isn't that how you write a paper?
That's
or the valid
right. I mean,
that's
what a paper does, though. This is what a paper does, though. It argues things. And there are a couple of different things I want to say first. V, can you post Digital Hammurabi's message to Jim? Because I love this. This
Which one? There was more than a few.
The ultimate instantiation of the necessary precondition of intelligible possible impossibilities of the ground of all Kantian beings of Wittgenstein. That one.
What do you mean post it?
Could you show it in the bottom?
Oh
God. No. Yeah, it's very Wittgenstein. It's a very Wittgenstein comment. Okay, whatever. You're gonna look at it later.
I just want to send.
That is hilarious. But real quick, let me kind of clarify the audience here, because people talk about in the audience talking about science, and one saying this is babble. This is not babble. This is actually philosophy. This is actually metaphysics. What Dr. Sijuwade is doing. But I think what's happening.
People get lost.
They get lost because their minds are in a different domain. And so they're not understanding what is being discussed because they're so fixated on a very different domain of discourse. As Dr. Sijuwade pointed out, science is not to explain the ultimate meaning of everything. What science does is gives the best guess, the best information allows us to ascertain, and philosophy kind of guides that, whether it's scientific realism, scientific instrumentalism, scientific anti-realism. But philosophy is what explains things that science cannot even begin to do, because science does experimentation and empiricism, cannot do. It's
you have to use your imagination.
I know. I would disagree. I would say yes, because a lot of things that became what are the domain of science started out in the domain of philosophy.
Okay, so how would science address things like what is a truth maker to make a proposition true? How would science even deal with that?
That's the point. I don't know.
It's not in the domain of science.
Right.
There's just with what Steve is saying, it literally will never be able to do that, because
it can't be.
What science is focusing on is physical reality. So
you run into the exact the same follow through with philosophy, though, because a lot of what philosophy, well, I shouldn't say a lot of, what philosophy can say a lot of the time is like, there's no possible way for you to actually know this thing, right? Well, then how can you possibly...
even just the basic claim, the basic claim of him being a necessity.
Well,
like just that alone.
Just even if you go with, it's not possible for science to ever touch this domain, how can you justify that when you have a whole field of study of philosophy that says you can't know anything?
But it's just literally the definition of the domain itself. The definition of the domain is it focuses on physical reality. It's like, for example, if I'm looking at biology, biology has a narrow focus upon a certain phenomena, that it's not going to be speaking about things in chemistry, or it's not going to be speaking about things.
It's not going to explain fusion of stars. It's not going to be. Biology's not going to explain fusion of stars.
Physical sciences just focuses on physical reality. So metaphysics is more general. It's saying whatever fundamental reality there is, we need to give an account of that, be it physical or non-physical.
Is it not a little bit too far to say that, at least I would take the position that it's a little bit too far to say that that metaphysics can never be defined or never be measured by science, because we have things that are considered metaphysical that we simply just have not put the effort into, quite frankly, in science, that we could. So like pain.
And
You can
once we
measure
do,
that.
we'll
You
call
can
it
measure
science.
someone's experience, and you can use the physical ramifications of those things and measure the physical ramifications of those things to then build some kind of chart or some kind of agreed upon consensus about this is what a level 2 headache is.
Yeah, but I think you're
Pain itself being
looking at certain
metaphysical.
phenomena which again is physical. So science is going to have an account for that. But what
But
I
we're
think
talking about a God. You're talking about something that
No,
is
but-
fundamental.
well-
Wait, please let me finish, Steve. You're talking about
Yeah.
something that you're saying is the basis of the fundamentals of reality. Like it or not, the world we live in is part of of that reality. So if God is a metaphysical necessity, it has to have some kind of influence on the physical reality, which could therefore be measured.
But no one is. I've never come out and saying I don't believe God is, not at all present or providentially in control of the world or doing things. I obviously would affirm that. What I'm saying to you is the argument itself is not
Sure.
focusing on that phenomena. So
Yes.
if this is not to be taken, if this is to be taken as phenomena, which it is being taken,
Yeah.
then it should also be accounted for by a naturalistic worldview.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
what I'm saying to you is someone who assumes a naturalistic worldview, what is the best explanation for this phenomena?
Right.
And I'm not looking at other phenomena because that will
Yes.
change the question. I'm not looking at that, but I'm saying just this specific phenomena,
Mhm.
what is the best account for that? That's what I'm saying.
Right.
That's
But what I was getting at was, if you're going to say that the metaphysical cannot be measured or cannot be within the domain of science, I think that's not reasonable, and I think that's not fair, mostly because if you have a metaphysical being that is fundamental to reality, it has to be measured not by your argument, just by what we were talking about a minute ago, in saying that, hey, metaphysics cannot be measured by science. Yeah, well, it has to be. If you've got a fundamental being that is necessary for physical reality as we know it to exist, it has to be measurable in some case because its influence should be somewhere within the domain of what we physically deal with.
Yes, but again, I don't see how that. I think that brings too many conflicts. Too many points.
I'm not talking about your argument. I'm talking about what
No,
we're
I'm not talking about the
discussing.
argument. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this point about metaphysics and physics.
Yeah.
I think I was just saying. I think Steve gave a very good example. So you'll have, one area of metaphysics is, let's say, trying to understand what the nature of truth is and truth maker theory.
Right. There are
What would
different
physics
domains.
have anything to do with that?
Well,
Physics assumes the working
Right.
of that thing and then
Yeah,
utilizes the working of that to do its scientific work. You assume that things
Right.
have truth value. Well, for example, the correspondence
Yeah, you have
theory
to
of
make
truth.
assumptions. Right.
Yeah,
I-
I'm saying so, but that's a metaphysical thing. That science has to even
Yeah.
assume that in order to do it. So the correspondence theory of truth, saying that propositional truths correspond to reality, that's a metaphysical issue. But then that's assumed in order to do physics. So how could physics even have anything to say about that? Because it needs to utilize that in order to even function.
Like
So I'm
I
saying
said-
there are things. Sorry.
So, like I said,
No.
when we go down it comes with the problem of when you go down the line of argumentation and you go down the line and where you get Jim getting stuck and where you get a lot of people in chat saying that I don't understand how is this applicable and how can we apply it? If you just make the argumentation and you say, hey, listen, this is the best explanation. This is why it's the best explanation. Therefore, it is the best explanation. Well, great. Now we go to the next step of being like, okay, so does the explanation actually comport with what we see? And if it doesn't, then the explanation and the assumption doesn't work. So,
No, not
like
necessarily,
Jim was
because
saying,
then-
like if you
Yeah.
said, and I agree with you,
Yeah.
like, hey, you have to have a problem with my criteria. Well, Jim has a problem with the criteria. He's having a trouble with
Which one?
using God and using goodness, right?
No, but
Which-
that's not
which
the
you
criteria.
agree
Right.
to-
with
Those are
wave.
those are the criteria.
Okay, so what am
Well,
I?
right.
no, I know. So they're not the criteria, but that's how the God is being described. He's being heralded for his consistency and always doing the best thing for everybody, and that he's personal, and that he's a creator. There's a lot of these things that are I feel like are almost
baggage.
being smuggled in
baggage.
under this like this skirt of metaphysics.
Well, okay, you can say that, but I don't believe that's what's happened, because I think I've been very clear in defining God. I haven't kept it, because I could keep it at a general level and say there is a God and he's a perfect being. And given he's a perfect being,
okay, perfect being.
No, that's what I'm saying to you.
Okay, perfect being. See, that alone is a problem. I mean,
hold on. I'm trying to say to you what I didn't do. So if I went to that level and I just kept it very general, because you could then say, well, what does perfection mean? Is perfection relative, or is it like this or that? So you won't even be able to get the argument off, from the starting track. But what I'm trying to say to you is,
but you did say maximally good.
No, hold on. The way I've defined God as a trope that has limitless power. Given that he has limitless power, he will do what reason dictates. Reason dictates that you will bring about other things that exist. And so he will bring about other things that exist. That will also include the non-fundamental
how does God reason?
And the grounding relation. So I don't know what step I've done there that wouldn't be clear enough for someone to say, well, you smuggled in something here. I don't know what I smuggled in.
I think it had to do with
like what you say is reason, but what is reason if God isn't going through these thought processes? What is reason when you are God, when you're omnipotent? I just don't understand how you can say that.
Maybe I could parse it for you, Jim. Are you asking?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. How can God have any kind of dispensational states where he is in real time, per se, at least our time, actualizing things or making decision making? To me, reason is metaphysics. I think reason falls under science. Science utilizes things like in induction. It uses reason, but all those things are what we mean by reason. All these things we mean by induction. All the theories that we use for the correspondence theory of truth, theories of knowledge, theories of justification. These are all just completely outside the realm of science, right? So,
I think what does it mean when God uses it? That's what I'm asking. What does it mean when God uses
reason? Okay, so how does God make decisions? Is basically asking him. But he already answered that.
I don't think that's quite what he's asking. I think he's saying that you've got this being that you're positing, and I'm taking out the God thing, and I'm taking out the goodness thing, I'm taking out all that, and you're saying there's a being that reasons, and he is locked within this box of picking out of any choice. He has to pick the most reasonable choice. Reasonable by what standard? Like, what does that mean when this being is using reason? Because the only reason we kind of even know is our own.
Like if God goes up to this box and he pulls out something and he hides it from everybody, and everybody else goes up and they look at it and they say, okay, what would God pick? Let's pick what God would pick. Why would God pick what he picked, and how would we be able to identify something in that box as good without seeing him do it directly?
But I would say there is one standard of reason, and maybe it's reducible to certain things that we would say are found in logic and other areas. But the standard of reason that we utilize, which we don't know perfectly, God utilizes it, but he will know it perfectly. And so he will be guided correctly and to pick the right one. So whatever standard of reason that we are utilizing, I don't have a problem why God wouldn't be able to utilize that same standard. Because unless you're going to question and say we don't know.
It's a human thing. You're talking about like human versus divine, like reason. It involves,
Well, Jim, hold on 1 second, because you're getting caught in the God thing again.
Yeah.
Remove the God thing again.
I'm sorry. I'm not a philosopher, so please forgive my ignorance.
It's getting caught into the well, if God is divine, then he has this special knowledge, which I don't think is what you're saying. I think what you're saying is that he's just he knows it. He knows all of it. So because we can't possibly know everything, we don't know all the variables of what is and is not a good decision, but God knows these, therefore he knows what the most reasonable decision is. And so what might seem like the most reasonable decision to us, because we're lacking knowledge, God isn't lacking that knowledge. He has all knowledge. And because he has all knowledge, his decision and rationality would be the best possible or most possible reasonable decision.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of putting it. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm a helper.
So yeah, that's good.
Like I said, I'm not trying to say that your argument is wrong. I'm just trying to explain where people in the chat and where I think maybe Jim is getting lost. I'm not saying that you're wrong.
God damn it, I'm not getting lost.
I really, because I think this is a reasonable thing to get lost in.
Well, he's got
no. It's just I'm asking for certain things to be qualified, like God and things like that, and like standards of goodness or whatever, and I just feel like that, like I'm not getting those.
That's why we removed them from the argument, because the argument isn't actually about the goodness or the God part.
So then we're no longer talking about
whether God is metaphysical
necessity. Because we can't talk about God or
hang on, we're talking, Jim. But Jim, we're talking about the ground. What the whole argument is basically, how do we ground these things? I mean, I think, would you agree, though, Jim?
I think you've
hang on one second.
At that point, you've misnomered the question and what the discussion and debate was about, because it was about God being a metaphysical necessity. And if Dr. Sijuwade is fine with saying, hey, it's not God, we're going to remove that, you've completely...
Hold on. Can I qualify that, please? Can I qualify that?
Yeah, please, by all means.
Yeah, I was saying, obviously, I label this thing I've defined as a trope that's omnipotent as God. But I'm saying, because there was so many problems in, God, but God, problem of evil, all these sort of things, I said, for argument's sake, don't call it God. Just still say that there is this entity that is like this. I identify it as God. I think other people would identify it as God.
Is that a problem?
Just for argument's sake, like your standpoint, going off in different things that weren't so related to the phenomena. And I was trying to say, well, if this argument, and I'm just repeating this point, if this argument is going to be shown to be fallacious, it needs to be shown to be fallacious at a certain point. And I think semantics isn't going to do that. So that's why I said just get rid of the word.
All right. So let me put on a nutshell, Jim. Okay. So Jim, in order to assail his argument, there's a couple ways you have to go about doing it. Okay. You have to say, okay, given your premises, your conclusion does not follow. There's a misstep somewhere along the way. Okay. You don't have to accept the initial things. You don't. It's not something like you have to accept. But to show that it's not a good argument, or to show that it's assailed, there has to be some misstep along the way. And he's saying, look, this is what I'm starting. This is where I'm conclusion. Where in the middle is it, missing? Is that a good way of putting it, Dr. Sijuwade?
I think I can answer that.
Because whenever you are talking about, a God, a creator God, a personal God that created us, that has an interest in us, that does the maximally best thing every time, that is omnipotent, then you expect every other action to reflect that. And then it seems like that once I could, conceive of something that that contradicted that nature, that character that was portrayed for me, then we start stripping away characteristics until now we're down to bones, and there's nothing else to apply to it. And it's just like, God is just a box now. It's just an empty box.
I mean, Jim makes a really good point. It's about, like, this discussion is built on, is God a metaphysical necessity? God has a lot of baggage with it. So when you remove God and if we're taking God as in, like, the Christian God, or we're taking God as in, like, what we had said at the beginning, that any of the Judeo-Christian gods would suit this definition, then you're bringing along that omnipotence, you're bringing along that he's personal, you're bringing along that he interacts with the world, you're bringing along that he created the world. And so if you start bringing in this goodness and the problem of evil, these are things that need to be addressed, because the reality we experience does not necessarily comport with the God part of the argument. Right, so if you
Right.
want to,
Well,
if you
but
want to,
I-
like Jim was saying, strip it down and say, hey, listen, we're not going to use God. We're just going to say a being of some sort. We're not going to use
No,
goodness. Then it's a matter
Yeah, we
of
can do
not
that.
necessarily your argument, but it's a matter of backpedaling the discussion that we thought we were having, which is
but I
is
don't.
God
Yeah.
a metaphysical necessity?
But I don't think I've done that. I was just saying I'm happy to bring the word God back and the word goodness
Yeah.
back. But I'm saying what happened a lot of the time, I believe, was that it wasn't focused on the issue, because you need to go with the definition that's in front of you. If I said God defined as a trope, but also the creator of everything and the God of Israel and all of these sort of things, and that's my explanation that I'm putting on the table to explain the phenomena, then you could say, well, this point is problematic, this point is problematic, this point is problematic. But I'm saying to you, the way I am defining God is in this specific way. So you have to have a problem with the specific definition and the entailments of that definition. And you can't just bring in but the problem of evil, or this sort of thing, or
Yeah.
this sort of
Yeah,
issue,
I
this
get
sort of issue.
Well, that's
Because
why it's
the
a
way I
problem
want-
when you why if the problem is goodness and you take out goodness, then there's no longer a problem. If you take out
No, but
God and
when
all
I
this other
define-
stuff, then you've
Yeah,
removed
why-
the
yeah, but when
problems
I-
that you get
sorry.
with that kind of a God.
But when goodness was defined, it was just saying that God would do what reason dictates.
Yeah,
if there is
and
a
I
best
have no
action,
issue with that.
and all those sort of things. So I don't think anyone would disaffirm that. It seems to be that God
No.
would do that. If there's a best
That's,
action, he
that's
would do it.
standard.
But then
Yeah.
my problem is that I'm not trying to say to you that I'm giving an explanation that accounts for the world that we have here. That would be a cosmological argument. That would be saying the universe. And then you could go and say,
Okay.
well, there are
How does
features
it-
of the universe. There are features of the universe that doesn't work with your definition, because there's evil in the universe, there's this in the universe, there's this in the universe. But I'm not doing that. That's not the phenomena. The phenomena is saying whatever reality is, okay?
Mhm.
Whatever reality is, this reality needs to be accounted for, because metaphysicians are saying we have this structured reality. What is the thing at the bottom of this structure? And I'm trying to say to you, God is defined in the specific way that I am. So what I'm saying is you're bringing in different phenomena that's not related to what's been accounted for by this explanation. So if I was giving you another argument, then I can understand that. But I'm trying to say that it's not relevant to exactly the
Yeah, I happen to
argument.
agree with that. I have two questions before we get to the super chat. So two questions. So one, I'm going to ask Dr. Sijuwade for this question. This is my stipulative personal usage definition. By the way, I'm not prescriptivist, contrary to people believe. This is completely descriptive of, just for argument's sake. I use this particular definition that I made up. Okay, so it's mine. It's completely stipulative. I say that right off the bat. But I wanted to see what you think of it. Okay, because it's not for the super metaphysical person. Okay, it's just for the average person to have a conversation with. I define it as this: a necessary being or agent with intentionality that all contingents are dependent upon, and or can prescriptively change or suspend natural law by having complete dominion over an aspect of nature.
Okay.
I'll read it again. So basically, a necessary being, because I'm going to ask Jim that question in a second about if God exists, would he be necessary? Because I cannot think of a God that wouldn't be in the context of an omni God, of a trope God. But a necessary being or agent with intentionality that all contingents are dependent upon, and or can prescriptively change or suspend natural law by having complete dominion over an aspect of nature. And obviously that goes to the Greek or Roman pantheonic gods. But I mean, to me is to have I could work when I get an ichtheist who says, I don't know what you mean by God. I'm like, okay, well, here you go. And because they usually say there's no meaningful or cognitively meaningful uses of the word God. I'm like, well, here you go. This is intelligible. What's wrong with that? Would you have an issue?
Do you
with
not
that
see the
definition?
problem? Do you not see the problem using this
let-
definition in this context?
Well, that's what I mean. I'm not saying for his argument may or may not work. He can answer that, but do you have a problem with that definition as I'm using it?
I don't.
I mean, in regards to the conversation, yeah, I do have a problem with it.
Would it work for this argument?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean,
because they're assertions.
You have to.
They're just assertions. These are descriptions. These are characteristics of a character that has been posited to me that I have no reason to believe. And it's just saying, well, they just happen to line up with how they're supposed to, and so to me it seems a little convenient. And forgive me if I just don't take people at their word.
Let me ask you this then. If go ahead, Dr. Sijuwade,
No, I was just saying, sorry. The reason is provided by the phenomena that you're accounting for. So if I believe that there is a burglar in my house, or that someone's, committed a murder, for example, how am I going to be able to say which person it is? Well, I'm going to look at the phenomena, and the phenomena, according to a certain criteria, will lead me to say it's this specific entity who did the specific action. So you postulate, okay, it's David with this specific quality, but then there's Bill who has no legs and no arms. Okay, who committed the murder? Well, the murder was done in this specific way. The phenomena is this. So according to the criteria, it seems to be the person who has legs and who had the motive. So this is how we operate. We put forward explanations. We have an intuitive criteria.
It's a deductive argument. Yeah.
And then we investigate what builds it. But science even operates in this way.
What kills it is what kills is that you don't choose Colonel Mustard, you don't choose the butler, you don't choose Mr. Plum, you don't choose his wife, you choose the disembodied mind living in the attic.
I think.
Are you saying God? But God isn't defined as that here. That's the problem. So you're attacking a definition, an explanation.
Okay, you're talking about an ultimate being, an ultimate necessary being that all things depend upon it.
Yeah, I'm saying.
Jim,
for me, I think that's a little bit strawmanning, because you look at the definition that I put, and then you'll have to go and say there's a problem with this definition outside of bringing in the problem of evil, which is not to be accounted for at this a priori stage of looking at the explanation. Then, the way you have to show my explanation is
there need to be more. There need to be more qualifiers for your God. Then, like, does he have agency? Because Jim, he needs to have agency.
Let me ask you this, because we do get to the super chat. So, Jim, let me ask you this. If there is a God, now again, this is hypothetical, right? I mean, so if there is a God,
what's your definition of God?
Just don't. If let's assume that
to be fair, Steve, you brought up a whole nother definition. I think that's a fair thing for him to ask.
No. If there's a being that exists, which is the explanatory power for all things that are contingent, or that is actualized as possible world, that is the grounding for all metaphysical things. If such a being exists, okay, would you say that being is more likely to be necessary or contingent?
Well, you use the word necessary twice in its description, so I would say necessary.
Okay, my bad. So let's try that again. If such a being exists that is the grounding for these things, okay, would you say that that particular God is more likely going to be a necessary being or contingent being?
It's a grounding for what things? For everything?
Yes, metaphysical grounding for morality, for justifications, for physicality, for everything.
Then by definition, by the way you defined it, then yes, I would have to accept
that. He froze. Did you
guys
hear that?
I couldn't say otherwise.
Man. He said yes. He said yeah, because the way you've defined it would require him to say yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Dr. Sijuwade, would you agree upon that?
Yeah, I mean, I would. I think. But my definition of God as this trope who has the power that he has entails that he would exist in this way. He is necessary. He is the ungrounded entity.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say to you is that I feel like the options haven't been taken. The available options haven't been taken. So you're basically saying, I don't even want to play this game. That's how I'm feeling. It's like, this is the game that it's not myself, someone who's arguing for theism, but this is what non-theists assume working in metaphysics, that these are the options. Now, let's go with the options and let's weigh their explanatory value. So what I'm trying to say to you is I feel like the game hasn't even started, because you're not attacking the argument. You're bringing in things which are not relevant to the argument, because when you're looking at explanation, it's an a priori activity. You're looking at the definition and saying, are there logical contradictions in your definition? The entailments don't follow. There's problems here, problems here, problems here. But what you are doing, you're taking a posteriori approach.
What was you named something. You name a criteria predictive power.
No, but hold on. Because what you're doing is you're not attacking the fulfillment of the criteria. You're attacking the explanation. So even before weighing the explanation in line with the criteria, you're saying the explanation itself is problematic because of goodness and evil and God who cares for me and all these sort of things. But you're bringing in a posteriori data at a level when it shouldn't be. First, you look at the explanations. and say, these are the explanations on offer. A priori activity. Are there contradictions? No, no, no. So let's put them forward. Now, what best fulfills this criteria given our data? Then you weigh them. Now, what's happened, I believe, is we're at that first stage where you're not even going with the explanation, but you're using a wrong methodology when it should be saying, actually, your entailment doesn't follow from omnipotence to freedom or this and that, or there's a problem with understanding what it means to be this specific thing, blah, 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 blah. But it shouldn't be from an a posteriori standpoint of saying, but what about the evil in the world? What about all of this? What about this? That's when you get to the explanatory power stage, which you'll then need to go and look at. So my problem is I don't believe you've attacked the argument. I don't believe you've shown that the argument is fallacious and that the postulation of God defined in the way I have is not the best explanation for these phenomena that we started off with.
There's a question from the chat. I'm just going to jump in real quick because I think it kind of is in line with this. And it's from Smitty and as well as Lord Magicus. It says, they're curious as to know what your argument is that an omnipotent intelligence is necessary to explain reality.
Okay. So what I would say is because, again, it's the criteria. The explanatory stopping point is going to be fixed at the thing that best fulfills the criteria. So if I can have a more simple explanation, or I can have an explanation that has greater explanatory power, then that's going to be the thing which is the necessary or fundamental entity that's postulated. And what I'm trying to say to you is that what a lot of metaphysicians do is that they stop at one level, but I'm saying according to the criteria, we should descend further down and we get to a level where I don't think we can go any further. Mm-hmm. And that is the level that God is found at. And then he can be postulated as the fundamental
Maybe I can expand on that a little bit and say, follow up and say, okay, so why this necessary, why an omnipotent intelligence necessary rather than none?
Because then they wouldn't have any explanatory power. So why would there be anything that exists then? So you'll lose explanatory
There'll be no causal
power.
Ability.
Yeah, there'll be no reason for these things to come about.
Yeah.
So there has to be some form of power, and it has to be power guided in a certain way that will then allow us to have explanatory power. Sorry?
The question then would be why?
Because then if you postulate something without any power, then how can it have any...
How has a big change, right?
Well, it does. So, the point is that it doesn't, right? So people are asking, so if you're going to posit that this is the best explanation or the simplest explanation, why is this more simple than there isn't one and it just is?
So what you need to do is
an intelligent being? Why does it why does it have to be that? Why can't it just be a powerful being that has no intelligence and just farting?
Because what you have, if you go with that explanation, you are losing one of the components of the criteria. So you might have simplicity. Oh, it's more simple than what you've said. But then you lose explanatory power. You lose the predictive power.
You already explained that it doesn't have explanatory power because we haven't gotten to that part.
Exactly. So the explanation will then be put to the side. Because what you want is something that best fulfills all of the components of the criteria.
But now you said that Jim can't talk about the explanatory power because you're not talking about that level of the argument.
No. I didn't say that. I was saying to you that the problem he has is he doesn't like the explanation that I'm putting forward. But he has to look at it.
I'm not talking about what Jim's doing. I'm talking about what you're saying. So if we're saying that this is an omnipotent, intelligent being, and you're saying that if you were to remove either of those qualities from the criteria, then you wouldn't have any explanatory power. But when Jim was asking about the explanatory power, you were just saying that no, you're not. We're not talking about that part of the argument. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
So
because what I was
I'm confused. Sorry, I'm just being confused.
So no, I mean what I was saying is that when he was looking at the formulation of the specific hypothesis, he was having a problem with goodness. But then the way that he was saying goodness doesn't follow is because he was bringing a posteriori data.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't saying it doesn't follow, and I wasn't bringing anything a posteriori. I was asking you to. I mean, to set it, like establish the metric for goodness, like determine how you did that without without using a posteriori or
But I mean, I was doing that, and I was saying, well, he'll do the reasonable thing. But then you were saying, well, reasonable when there's this issue here, there's this issue here about reality.
Well, no, not issues. No, it's not issues. It's what is reason. That's all I mean. I'm not saying that I wasn't questioning certain decisions.
But then I came back to
the claim that God uses reason.
But the same standard that, I mean, we assume that we understand what reason is, or we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So we have a standard of reason that
we assume it's a posteriori.
No, but hold on. We utilize a standard of reason. God utilizes the same standard of reason.
Right.
He has a clearer view of it
so
than we do.
These are post hoc rationalizations of what is reasonable.
But why would it be? Sorry, I'm confused.
Like, okay, so if we didn't know what was reasonable, how would we know what was reasonable? By watching God. After watching God, can we determine, or can we at a certain point predict what option God would choose if we had knowledge of all of his potential options, because he always chooses the best one? Like, so there has to be some sort of explanatory power.
If we knew the truth value of every proposition, then yes, we could. But obviously, we don't have that.
Possible.
So we do that. But that's not the problem. Sorry, just to go back to the point of what I was trying to say.
So it can have predictive power then, or explanatory power.
Sorry.
If there's no, if truth doesn't, I mean, if we can't establish any certain truth, then I mean, then it doesn't matter.
I didn't say
it doesn't matter if you have explanatory, like, then what does it mean to have explanatory power?
No, but I didn't say that we can't get to the truth of the thing. I'm just saying we don't know the truth value of every proposition. We don't know that. That would be omniscience. So we know the truth value of many propositions, but not every proposition. So I'm saying if you knew the truth value of every proposition, then you would be able to know what God is going to do in a certain situation. That's what I was saying. So I don't think we would say we lack that capacity. I think we'll agree we lack the capacity to know the true value of every proposition.
Yeah,
but what I was trying to say with the point, sorry, Steve, I don't know if you want to.
No, I just want to stir on something, but go ahead.
What I was trying to say with the explanations is, okay, so you're putting forward the explanation of an entity that either lacks intelligence or lacks omnipotence. Okay, put that forward, and then I put forward the one that has intelligence and omnipotence. Then we now need to look at the criteria. And I'm trying to say to you is that what you would have is, yes, you might have a more simple explanation, but you are not going to have one that has any predictive power. So at that criteria level, you would lose out. So you only want to go to the explanation that best fulfills each of the components.
Well,
you don't want to lose one of the components.
But you're just asserting that the God you're talking about has these upgrades. You're just asserting that.
That's what an argument is.
There's nothing to demonstrate. Like what does it look like? What is the difference in the end result in the world around us? What would a world look like in a God that doesn't always choose the maximally best thing versus a God that does? Like,
I think the best way to phrase what Jim is trying to say, Jim, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean to speak for you. I know I've done that a couple of times this. I apologize.
You probably will speak better.
Jim is saying if we agree, like we're not questioning, we're not attacking your paper, and we agree with it, and we say, okay, this is how we're doing it. This is how everything looks. This is the fundamental at base level. What do we expect to see, and what do we see, and how do we compare those things to verify that your proposition is accurate?
Okay. And what we see, or the phenomena, is that there are entities that are dependent. So that means they're non-fundamental. And there is a relation of grounding that connects these entities. That's all the phenomena I'm looking at. So it's a very narrow phenomena that I'm bringing on board. I'm not saying, this or this or that. I'm saying all the non-fundamental entities, okay, be it whatever they are, and the relation that connects them. We will expect to see that.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm trying to say is
God is the simplest explanation.
He is the simplest explanation. He's qualitatively and quantitatively the simplest, because in the specific way,
he's overqualified. It's like hiring a PhD to clean the coffee pot.
Why would it? Sorry.
But because you only have like just 2 line items that need to be met. That, I mean, it doesn't.
But sorry, don't you want that? So
I don't understand like how you have these 2 line items that are being met, and you say, oh, only God could do this. This can only be a maximally great God.
He's not saying. Oh, hang on. He's not saying only. He's saying it's abductive argument. Again, going back, this is the abductive argument, not an only argument. Fine.
The simplest explanation is that an omnitrope God did it. Is that better?
The simplest explanation fitting with our background knowledge is that entity. So all I'm saying to you, that what you need to do is bring another explanation, and this was brought forward. One explanation was, well, maybe there's an entity that lacks power and lacks intentionality or intelligence. What I was trying to say to you is, okay, if you bring that forward, the problem that you'll have is you'll lose out on the explanatory power. So there needs to be another explanation.
That's fine. But I'm asking you, like, why do you think that this is the like that it's God? Like,
I'm not sure. Also,
for what reason?
What explanatory power you lose?
So, okay, we have there being other things existing, non-fundamental entities, and we have the relation of grounding. That's a phenomena. Now, if you bring an entity that has, are you saying no power at all?
I think what I started with was no intelligence, but if you were to just go through and like start removing things,
okay, so is it? Yeah. Okay, so no intelligence. So why would it then exercise any agency to bring about this thing?
Why not?
It wouldn't be possible.
Sorry. Why would that not
completely
be possible?
Not possible?
Why?
Sorry. So it would just. So think about it like this: it will just have power, but it won't exercise it. You need to have a reason why that power would be exercised.
It would have the potentiality, but no ability to utilize it into actuality.
Yeah, why? Just
kind of like God holding on to it for eternity before creating the universe.
Well, hang on. Let me ask you this: how about because I have a lot of friends that are pandeist. So how about a pandeist approach? That if you had an agent, you had some kind of causal agent, but either became the universe, right? In other words, some kind of just God died, pandeism, and the universe was created out of his death. Or from an aesthetics point of view, God created the universe because he aesthetically liked it. But instead of having this kind of theistic personalism or some kind of theistic approach, it's just some deist God that walked away. How would that affect your argument, though? Because
so would you say what is God identified as? Sorry, what's God identified? Are you saying the universe itself?
All powerful beings, so it still has the omnitropes. Yeah. But but basically, let's say an argument from aesthetics or something that God created the universe just because he liked it. It was beautiful, but then you know what? He has nothing to do with it. He just walked away, and then whatever happened with the universe was just all deterministic.
Yeah. Well, the problem that you have is that grounding is a synchronic relation. So it's not saying that God brought the universe into existence diachronically. So there's a temporal sequence. It's saying there is something now that if you get rid of that thing now and its activity, you will not have any of these other things and layer structure reality. So like if we have the normal picture, get rid of the human brain, you don't have the economical theories. So what does
the universe without God look like?
Sorry, say that.
You wouldn't. Well, you wouldn't. He asked, what would a universe without God look like?
Well,
if we were to take God out of the universe, if God were to cease to exist this evening, what would happen to the universe?
Okay, so if we're saying I want to use the term universe. Just the phenomena is all of reality. All of reality would cease to exist. Yeah, all of reality would cease to exist. Because that fundamental entity is what ultimately grounds everything else. So again, it's just picturing that idea. Get rid of the quarks. You don't have the economical theories. Get rid of the brain. You don't have the economical theories because they are all grounded synchronically by the things lower.
But you're not claiming that God is quarks.
Leo is
because
No, I'm
quarks
not.
aren't
Below that level.
because
I'm saying below that
quarks
level.
aren't acting with intentionality.
Leo is
No,
in
but hold
the
on.
chat
You
reiterating
lost what I said
Jim's
there. I wasn't
question in a
saying.
way that might be a little bit easier to wrap, or like
Okay.
a little bit easier to bridge. And he's saying Jim is asking
Okay.
a good question. How does God source the grounding relations?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a
Sorry,
much better way
just-
to ask it. Thank you.
How does source? What do you mean by that? Sorry, I'm a bit confused about source.
Okay. So let me. I think I know what he was asking for. Okay. So in your paper, you would make it very clear there's a direct asymmetrical hierarchy. Okay, correct?
Yeah.
And so that
Yeah.
you're saying that God is the explanation of why those relationships do exist, why there is the grounding relationships, right? The reflexivity of the grounding, or the non-reflexivity of the grounding relationships. So you're without God to bind them all together.
Yeah.
Would we still
Yes.
would we still, like, for the mental? Okay, so let's look at the mental states. The mental is dependent upon the neurological states, correct? Mental facts.
Yeah.
You say that in your paper.
Yes, yeah.
Mental facts obtained because of the neurophysical facts. Okay, so there's some kind of
Yeah.
neurology, chemical base. These are all based upon chemistry. Goes to atoms. Atoms go to quarks. Quarks go to strings.
Yeah.
And so you're saying that God itself is the explanation of why those things have a dependency upon each other.
So he's the
And
ultimate
if God didn't
one.
exist,
So,
he's the ultimate dependency, right? So without that dependency,
the
everything just falls apart afterwards.
yes. Yeah. So I mean, you would say that, but you wouldn't. So there is a direct ground of each thing. So again, with that sort of picture, you have the theories, economical theories. You have then the mental states, and then the brain. The mental states are the things that are directly grounding the economical theories.
Mhm.
But if you get rid of the brain, you get rid of the mental states, you then get rid of the economical theories.
Yeah,
Because
everything at the
brain is
base
the one
above it
that's-
goes away.
Yeah, it's the
And
one that's
God-
ultimately grounding everything. It's the foundation. Get rid of the foundation
Yeah,
of the
that makes
house.
sense.
The house just crumbles down.
and God.
Sorry?
Well, whatever the foundation would be.
And
so
and
whatever,
God,
yeah,
you
if God is-
destroy the brain, you destroy a person's brain, you destroy their God.
I don't think that follows.
No, I wouldn't say God is dependent.
That doesn't
I
follow.
think God is fundamental.
Well,
So-
it would follow with
Sure it does.
it would follow with the Christian God, in that God is a very personal God that has a pretty much, Steve was talking about this on Twitter earlier. If you have if you ask a Christian what their God is like, you're going to get different answers depending on that person, because God is a personal God. So if you were to destroy that person, that version of that God no longer exists.
Yeah, that concept no longer exists.
no,
Sure.
I would.
Which would be
not agree with that. I would
metaphysical.
say-
But
No,
that's just a conceptualization, right? That would be a concept that no longer exists.
I would say that the concept that is affirmed
Yes.
would cease to exist because the concept is not there
Right.
anymore.
Right.
So the propositional statement that they're
Are you saying that
affirming-
we're metaphysicing wrong?
No. I'm saying, so if we believe things, all we're doing is we're believing propositions. That proposition that there is a Christian God, if there is no brain, would not exist within that person's mind. It would not be affirmed. However, what that proposition is corresponding to in reality would still exist. So what I'm saying to you is the concept proposition would...
What does it correspond to in reality?
Well, that's what I was going to ask him. Do you hold that?
Sorry.
Yeah, if there is a correspondence, but do you hold that? Do you hold that the facts exist regardless of? Okay, let's putting aside the correspondence theory for a second. There are, I believe, what are metaphysical facts that exist regardless of anything else. I'll also go to deflationary theory, but would you say that these facts exist independently if there's anyone around to apprehend them, if there's a universe around? Do those material facts, as far as relationships, law of identity, or even say moral facts, do you think those exist independently if there was nothing around at all? If nothing exists, do those facts still exist? Or are they so dependent upon God?
I think they would. Yeah, I would say they still exist. I think they are necessary.
But the dependency would be gone.
Yeah, so they would exist. They're not dependent upon anything in that specific way.
Yeah. And nothing could depend upon them either, though, right?
All right, we are getting.
I just read, gentlemen, but I have to wrap it up. I've enjoyed it, but and I hate that it's taken us so long to move so little in the.
We went all over the place.
I appreciate you being patient with me.
We do need to start wrapping it up. we have some questions from the chat and we have some super chat. So I'm going to run through those and I will let you guys know when there's one that needs to, like, that is more of a direct question. So Jack of Hearts said, you said that God was perfectly good and maximally powerful and would make the best choice. So either isn't the best world or God doesn't make the best choice. But you already said that God was perfectly good and maximally power and would make the best possible choice if they could. So either this isn't the best world or God doesn't make the best choice. And I think your answer to that was this is not necessarily the best world.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't believe there is one yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Joshua.
I don't have a problem with that either.
Joshua.
This is an abandoned Blockbuster video.
It feels like Joshua. It's one of those disaster movie videos.
It's a escape room.
Oh no. Joshua for $4.99 said, are you familiar with Hearthstone's divine relativity? If so, does his definition of God fit in your theory? Oh, sorry,
Sorry, no,
Hearththorns.
I'm Hawthorne. So what was his divine what, sorry?
Divine relativity.
It's the
No,
it's
no,
the
I'm not.
experience.
Yeah.
It's basically, it goes to natural theology that we can experience God through our senses, intuition, our feelings, and that's how we would apprehend such a being.
Okay.
Dave
yeah, I'm not really familiar with it. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's how he would argue we related to God. If we do it through sensory perceptions of feelings and intuition and emotions.
Smitty says found footage for the movie.
Found footage.
Dave for 5 says, thanks, Dr. Majors. Dave for 5 also said, God answers all prayers, but sometimes the answer is no. Anyone buying that ? And it's like, I don't know. We didn't really we kind of got to that stuff, but also we're kind of deciding where we were in this conversation. Converse Contender for $4.99 said, thanks for being here. If omnipotence is able to do any logically possible action, how do you get from being able to do said action to must do said action?
That's a mobile question.
So good question. So so I mean, it's that idea of then again, God would inevitably do what is the best action if there is one, or one of the good actions. And so he can perform any logically possible action. His omniscience allows him to know the truth value of each proposition. And so what is the best, what is maybe less than the best, and blah, 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 blah. And then if there is a best action in front of him, he will just then inevitably do it. So we'll just follow from that. The only time that it wouldn't follow is if there are two equally best actions, or there are two equally good actions. He will then have to choose between one of them. So example, like creating the world, if we don't say it's the best possible world, then there could have been a world with more humans, less humans, and then you have to pick whichever one.
Did you also hold that God knows all counterfactuals and subjective cases?
Yes, I do. I am a Molinist, so I affirm middle knowledge.
Okay, Craig. Okay, William and Craig.
No. So I mean, there's grounding objections. I've got a paper that I've submitted. Hopefully, it gets accepted later on, where I try and put forward another interpretation of it. Yeah, for middle knowledge.
Converse Contender for $1.99 said,
sorry,
go, Jim.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna. I think I'm gonna. I've heard a bunch of different people give you a bunch of different names. Like the new Swinburne and everything. I think Rock Hard Swinburne is a good one.
Go with that one.
Converse Contender for $1.99 said all actual world questions are irrelevant to the argument. Dave for 5 said Father, Son, and the furry spirit. Got it. Yep. God is a furry. That's my takeaway from this whole conversation is we have actually confirmed that God is a furry and furries are good.
So that's why they're running.
If furries exist in this actualized world, that actually is evidence that this is not the best of all possible worlds.
I don't know. Lord Magicus asked, the question that they wanted addressed was, does your metaphysical construct accurately describe what we observe in the physical universe? And if so, how do you know that's the only explanation for it?
Okay, very good point. I mean, what we normally do...
I think that's what Jim had been trying to get at the whole time, but it was very difficult to parse through with that difference in jargon. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where we start with, for example, we postulate the existence of a grounding relation given certain paradigm examples. So, as you were saying before, we have mental facts that are obtaining because of the neurophysical facts or whatever. Or you have, let's say, H2O molecules that are, they are grounded in, let's say, two H atoms and an oxygen atom. And so what we have is, we have things that we see in reality, paradigm examples, but then our metaphysical theorizing is saying, well, there is this relation that's tying them together. So a lot of philosophers are saying we need to postulate the existence of these things because it's not a causal relation. It's not a relation that you're going to find in the physical realm. Let's say you're going to study in physics. It's going to be a metaphysical specific relation. And so they're postulating this given the phenomena we see in reality. Things like, I mean, a good example is literally the H2O molecule. Why are these things existing in the way they're existing? Because they are grounded. An H2O molecule is grounded in two H atoms and an O atom. And so you have to postulate a relation of grounding in order to make sense of why these three things are combined together. So there is a start of physical reality, but then there's theorizing behind it.
And you hold to Kripke's rigid designators then?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. By the way, I got a lot of background noise here, so we're gonna be wrapping it up. So I think that's all the super chats, isn't it, B?
No,
you're muted.
No, it is not.
We got more. Okay.
Godless Comer for 5 says, to quote my favorite philosopher, "All we are dust in the wind, dude." Winky face. Helios for 10 says, physics could advance to the point where we could create an external universe where we can test fundamental assumptions. At that point, meta and theoretical physics become just physics.
Ooh, like a meta sandbox.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Intrigue Feline asked to Dr. Sijuwade, if you postulate a metaphysical necessity, what is the evidence then that would point to there being a metaphysical necessity?
It's there being a relation of grounding and non-fundamental entities.
Okay.
Because it best explains that. So, I mean, for example, if you have an explosion, what best explains explosion? That someone set off the bomb. I mean, you have to have that thing in order to have the explanation of there being an explosion. Mm-hmm. Why is there this thing occurring? The best explanation is this entity, and so this entity has to exist in order for that second thing to occur. So
it makes me think of things like the Higgs boson, where it's just like we know there's something. It makes me think of things like the Higgs boson in mathematics, where it's like we don't know what this is, but there has to be something there for the equation to function.
Well, no, and just like everything else, you just say God. It's God. It's a God particle.
No, but it's not like that at all. I think that's a caricature of the issue.
I couldn't help it though. She dropped it in my lap.
No, it's just if you are assuming metaphysical foundationalism, which a lot of philosophers do, that there is a fundamental entity, so they already take that assumption there.
Right.
Then all I'm saying is, well, what is the identity of this fundamental entity? How can we argue for that?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to argue for it being God.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
That's all. I mean, that's the way I'm approaching.
Yeah, no, and I get the argument, and I too tend to like even on justifications. I do tend to classical foundationalism, at least, or is this a kind of a moderate foundationalism, maybe? But I mean, these kind of things do beg the question of, or raise the question of, why is the fundamental aspects of nature? What is the basis from all reality has to stem from? I think it's a very pertinent metaphysical question that science isn't apt to likely answer, because it doesn't really deal with science. It deals with the actual foundation of reality, and reality is a metaphysical concept, not a scientific concept. Science takes it axiomatically that there is a reality to even observe. But it's philosophy that wants to get to these kind of really more foundational questions of what is the ultimate explanation of things? What is the grounding for these things? And I think both of you guys have, addressed it in your own way. I think that, obviously this is one of those questions that just is never going to be fully answered. But I do think your argument is good in the fact that, although it's not convincing, it is a reasonable argument of why there is some kind of grounding between the dependency layers that you outline in your argument. But I put the paper in the video description because people read it on their own to decide for themselves. I will tell you though, I haven't heard any counter argument to your argument that actually is from your argument though.
Helios for 5 said, I created a biome of life when I accidentally spilled yogurt behind the counter and didn't notice. Creation of life and existence doesn't require intention. And 82 had asked, given that virtual particles are present and quantifiable, if not caused by God, but rather field perturbations due to imbalances, how would that jive with the God necessity?
So, sorry, is it that, I don't know what that thing is, but whatever that thing is that the explanation for?
Well, okay, so he's asking, okay, in a metastable false vacuum, there's quantum perturbations, which cause these quantum bubbles to appear, called quantum foam.
Okay.
Oh,
he's asking,
yeah.
if these quantum perturbations in metastable false vacuum exist, what's underneath as an exploratory thing of that would just be, again, it's to avoid a way of saying we don't have turtles all the way down. There has to be something at the base level of reality that everything above it has a supervenience from. And science likes to try to answer those questions, but I personally don't think it can. I think this is the realm of metaphysics, but I don't think metaphysics can answer that question either.
Well,
I don't think it's answerable.
I want to just make sure that I actually understood what Dr. Sijuwade's paper is saying, because it sounds to me like the answer to 82's question would be that would be the particles being present and quantifiable are already part of the criteria. As in, like, these are part of the universe, because we're not using the universe, we're using reality, or we're using all of everything. Therefore, because it already exists in all of everything, then God necessitated it to begin with. So the God is already one step down that ladder of what is fundamental. So
but I mean,
already.
So yeah, it's. But it could be if, let's say, if these entities fulfilled the criteria better, then we should stop with them. They would be the fundamental explanation. But because I'm saying that they don't. Sorry.
Well, you're saying that they don't, but I think somebody could argue, and I haven't heard it yet, but somebody could argue that basically quantum fluctuations is the foundational. There's nothing below that.
But are they multiple entities? Are they multiple entities, or
they
just
would
one
be
entity?
they would have to argue that they're necessary, that they're either instantiations of one entity in multiple different forms. I mean, are you familiar with
exactly what I was trying to say, Steve? Is like I was writing this list of these adjectives and these descriptions that were being, like, I felt they were being hijacked onto there, like, like necessary, like. I mean, to be necessary is saying something. That's not just something that you can just nonchalantly apply to it.
Necessary just means that it has to exist in all possible worlds. That's the most simplest.
Exactly. That's a hell of a claim to just posit unsubstantiated.
But well, just with my point, sorry, just with if it's these entities that we're taking as the things that explain everything else. Why I'm saying it wouldn't fulfill it is because it would fail to fulfill one of the criterion, which is the criterion of simplicity. It will postulate not the fewest fundamental entities, or postulate a wide range of entities.
Yeah. Because I feel like that would be closer to not fulfilling the other of it being intelligent, because the intelligence for quantum is not required.
That's not.
No, so I'm saying, even if let's say we took the predictive power to be met, which you could argue on that it's not met by these entities. Sure. Yeah. One thing it would clearly not. It will not be more simple than this postulation of one omnipotence trope. It will lack qualitative simplicity, and/or it will lack quantitative simplicity. So you're going to lose that in one way. So what I've just been trying to say is, if people don't like this criteria, then fair enough. Okay, there's an issue. But if we are taking this criteria, and I think it's intuitive, this criteria, then I'm just trying to say God fulfills it because his existence logically entails the data. So you have predictive power or explanatory power. He fits with background knowledge because he's identified as a trope, and those are things which mesh with other things in other fields of knowledge. And he is simple because he is quantitatively simple because you're postulating one entity. He's also qualitatively simple because tropes are metaphysically simple. That means that they lack parts. So he wouldn't have any properties. So what you're having is the most quantitatively and qualitatively simple entity that fits with our background knowledge that leads us to expect the data.
I
So
can
reduce it
understand
to
why people are a little bit confused and a little bit frustrated because it's like, I feel like we're bouncing back and forth between saying, hey, this has, this works with, sorry, there's a term you used, and it was the information, like you were saying oh God, what was the word? Because we were saying that, hey, this is qualitative for the information and the knowledge that we already have, but then
fundamentality.
And then when Jim tries to apply it, you say, well, no, he's using information that is not background, or that is background information, and he can't use background information. But you're saying that this thing justifies the background information.
No, but that wasn't what I was saying. I was trying to say is he was having a problem with the definition I have, and how he was going about arguing for it was bringing something in like the problem of evil. What I was trying to say,
I didn't get the problem of evil.
No. So I mean, problems with our world and this God doing this or God doing that in our world. So I mean, there was a posteriori data that was brought in to go and say that the explanation itself, not looking at the data, because this thing that was brought in is not relevant to the data.
I think that's where it's getting lost. Is what's the point if we're not going to look at the data and follow through the argument, right? So if we take your argument, but if we take your argument as if it's correct, right? We've already agreed that if we take this as if it's correct,
but I don't want to do that. I want to get the correct option. So I'm saying to you that this is my explanation.
But I'm getting there. So if we take, we assume that it is correct, and then we look at what we're dealing with, and then start applying that. Does it fit the best, right? Because that's how you would, one of the ways, or I should say, you would go about and applying it. But as soon as Jim started applying it to what we deal with in reality, it was like, no, you can't attack my argument that way.
No, but it wasn't relevant to this phenomena. So I'm saying, if you want to use my explanation, the
God
criteria
made the best
to talk
possible
about
world out there, we just don't live in it.
No, to talk about another phenomena, then fair enough, do that. But I'm saying, what I was seeing Steve was saying here is that he's giving, or the super chat was giving another explanation. I was saying, okay, let's go with this explanation. Does it explain the data? Is it going to? No, because there are certain points where it fails to fulfill the criteria, which simplicity.
Maybe I'm just not understanding how.
Wait, just 1 second. Okay.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I do have to rush off in a few minutes.
No, I just want to see if I could take an actual crack at it at fulfilling that criteria with an explanation.
Okay.
That the explanation is that God, we have a large amount of background knowledge that shows that the accurate and inerrant transmission of knowledge to man is historically just shaky. And I think that there is some explanatory power there. And as far as scope goes, all of the recorded instances that we have, most of them involve some sort of error in either transmission or in historical accuracy or something like that. And as far as the criterion of simplicity, I feel like that's about as simple as it gets.
But you brought in different phenomena that.
Yeah, this is
no. But hold on. What's the phenomena that you're trying to account for?
I was just trying to meet the criteria.
Yeah, but you meet the criteria in order to explain what's the phenomena we're talking about.
So you're talking about this ultimate foundation that is this God, right?
No, I'm saying there is a phenomena, which is there is a relation of grounding. So what is the explanation that you're putting forward for that thing existing?
What do you mean?
He's challenging that if
what is a relation of grounding? Like is he the grounding or does he was he the middleman or what? I don't understand.
So the relation of grounding is just a relation that connects entities, less fundamental to more.
Right.
So you have, it's like you have a causal relation. If I push my cup, there is a relation of causation between myself and the effect. It's the same thing with this. There is a relation between less and more fundamental. So that relation exists.
Okay.
What accounts for it?
Gotcha.
Existence. That's what I'm trying to say.
So the mind. So
Got
like
you.
the mind.
Now, how do you
how
how do you verify which one meets the criteria?
Again, so if it explains the data, if it fits with our background knowledge, and if it is quantitatively and qualitatively simple.
And this is why
then
we get into
that's what we're
problems,
going.
because you just said if it meets the data, and then Jim gives you a bunch of data about God and the
No,
current
but he
situation
didn't.
we live
He
in.
didn't tell me how. What?
Yeah.
Hold on. He was
Can
speaking
I-
about text.
Can I finish?
Sorry,
real
sorry
quick?
for
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, when you say data, what do you mean by data?
Right. I think that there's
I'm
a
saying-
crosstalk about, like, because if you say, hey, listen, this
And, like,
meets the
background
data
knowledge.
and background knowledge, and then you say, well, but Jim can't use this. So why?
No, but I'm not saying that. It's just when he was saying he's taking a crack at it, he wasn't telling me how his explanation is explaining there being a grounding relation. He was talking about text and all these sort of corruptions.
Also explaining how Yahweh doesn't meet the criteria, or how God doesn't meet that criteria.
But the criteria when it comes to that relation. So please tell me. So him being a trope doesn't fit with our background knowledge. Him being a trope is not simple, and him having whatever the intentionality to ground existence doesn't entail the grounding relation. How? I mean, I'm not understanding.
As long as your only definition of him is a trope, then that's fine. But then we're not talking about a God. We're talking about a trope in the vaguest sense of the word. I mean, if we're talking about God, we can talk about God, but to talk about a trope is just like a literary device. I mean,
no, but what I'm talking about is bare theism. Bare theism is what natural theology does, and natural theologians who are atheists, they go with this and they would say, this is the
theology
definition of God.
does it.
We're not bringing in revealed knowledge. We're not talking about the God who's revealed as this person or blah, 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 blah. All we're saying is that at the base level, at the base level of theism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism will affirm this idea. They will also tack on other things given revelation.
And they'll also disagree with each other.
Yeah, that's not a problem. That's not my issue. What they would do is that they will affirm this at the base level. So at that base level, that's what we're doing natural theology on.
I want to ask my last question. I want to ask my last question before we wrap this up. So because I really wanted to answer this. Is part of your argument predicated on the affirming that because God is divinely simple, if God exists, he's divinely simple, that he is, a simpleton, what do they call it? When you have one of a set, there's only one of God, right? Singleton, yeah. So you have a singleton of God, Socrates singleton, yeah. So if you're relying on that to be the argument that because there's nothing more foundational than that, because he has no parts, nothing of any kind of comprised of anything, that also is something that goes into your argument that is a more reasonable abductive argument, because there's nothing more fundamental than a single entity that has no parts that explains something rather than multiple things.
No.
Yeah, I mean,
it has nothing to do with his
I'm
makeup.
asking
It has
him.
nothing to do with.
I'm asking Dr.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Argument. Yeah.
So,
that's right.
No,
that's
exactly
me why I thought.
No. So that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying when we get to that base level of this layered structure of reality, we have something which cannot be improved on when it comes to simplicity, because he is metaphysically simple, but also he accounts for everything else given him having power. So he accounts for everything else above the levels. So that's what I'm trying to say. And I'm honestly not trying to assume this to be true. I'm saying I would really like to see there being another explanation that says actually this entity is more simple and or accounts for the data better and or fits with our background knowledge than this one I've put forward. That's what I'm trying to do, and that's why I don't believe that's been done.
Have you been heard? Have anybody has people posited you other possible entities that would match that criterion?
No. If I'm honest, no.
I don't know.
But I want that. Yeah. I mean,
I'd have to seriously think about that. I
I'm not
seriously would have to think about that.
Epistemically possibility. I'm like, I can't really understand how, but I'm really happy to go and find it, because I think that will be the entity then that is absolutely fundamental, and it plays a role in this.
Would you agree that everything that descends from this ultimate foundation everything that exists based on causal links to each other on these waves and numbers of causes and effects, right?
Well, I'll say the relation is grounding, so it wouldn't be causation.
Okay.
If you're,
well,
they're linked together.
Would you agree that would you agree that in concept that both materialism and theism can both ground things, but materialism is grounding it in a number of different causes, whereas theism is saying that there's one cause and it's God?
Well, yeah, so I mean, in the paper,
theism so materialism is simpler than theism, because theism asserts everything that materialism does, but then combines those things and says, but God's responsible for all of this. So in reality, theism is more, involved and complicated than materialism is. Materialism is a much simpler explanation.
But it's not. But it depends what you mean by simplicity. I, from the get-go, already defined simplicity as there being the fewest fundamental entities. That's quantitative simplicity. Qualitative simplicity is the properties, the fundamental properties of this entity are fewest, and it instantiates the fewest kinds. So if you're understanding simplicity different, then okay, fair enough.
Because how could you say it uses fewer entities when you're adding in an entity?
Because if you're saying that
if materialism says there's this many entities, and then when you add God in, there's still this many entities and God, you're adding an additional entity.
No, you're not. You're not, because the postulation is there are these, let's say, infinite plurality, near infinite plurality of quarks or particles or whatever. That's the entities that you're putting forward. Well, count how many they are.
But those entities exist whether you add God or not, and say God is the baseline fundamental, right?
Yes, but no one is talking about existence. We're talking about fundamental existence. So I'm trying to say to you is which level is fundamentality at? Is it at the level of these entities, or is it at a lower level?
But you admit either way that if you go materialism and you go materialistic and say it's these things, and then that we know exist, and then you say we're actually going to use God to justify these things, you're still adding in an entity at that.
But I mean, that's how we increase in our knowledge. We try to account.
Sure, that's fine. But you agree with that,
right?
But
all you're doing is just asserting a foundation for foundations.
Understanding of the application of simplicity,
because
it's trying to say how many entities am I postulating at the fundamental level?
At the fundamental level,
well,
so you're saying
at the fundamental level,
these exist, but there's another level.
Yeah, I'm saying
here.
I'm postulating. I can either postulate.
We're gonna have like a half a God.
I can postulate many, or I can postulate one.
Right.
And why we then would say, well, we need to affirm the existence of this is because, yes, we have fewer number of fundamental entities. And so that's why we're postulating it. But that's how we do it. If we can
level below. Yeah.
No, but we of course we do that. So if at each level we have to add another level in order to account for the data and for the data and for the simplicity value that we get. Of course, with descending levels. So your descending levels, for example.
Right.
You're descending levels. If you have the economic level, you're descending a level because it needs to be accounted for.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going against that one. So I think the last question. Sorry, we do got to wrap up. Everybody's got to get out of here. We've been at this for a while. We should have a follow-up at some point. I would love to hear what Scott Clifton thinks of this, to be honest. I would love to have him on to have this conversation as well. Yeah. But okay, the last two questions.
You should have had on besides me.
You did great. No, I really enjoyed speaking to you.
Tim's awesome.
I appreciate it. I did as well.
How is metaphysics applicable? And if God has to take action, is that action not wholly physical, or at least partly, or is that action wholly metaphysical?
So I'm a bit confused about the question.
One is about like just metaphysics as a whole, and that is like, how is it applicable? How do you take what is like these concepts and this study of and these explanatory things in metaphysics, how and why are they viable? Just like how theoretical physics may or may not be viable, right? Like how do you take that and you say to somebody saying, "Hey, why does this matter?"
Yeah.
And the other question was, sorry, I'll just get both of the questions out and you can kind of, and then you'll get the
No,
last
that's fine,
word and we'll get on out of here.
That's fine.
And it's, if God has to take an action, that action can't possibly be wholly metaphysical.
Okay.
Because you're saying
okay,
like
cool.
God has to take an action, right? That action can't just be a metaphysical action for it to have any kind of.
That goes back to the mind-body
explanatory-
problem. How does the mental produce a physical causation?
Mhm.
Okay. So I mean, with the first one, how it's applicable is because we need a relation of grounding in order to understand the things that exist within reality, the levels of reality that we see. We don't really think about it because physics is more predominant in our society. We hear about laws of gravity and all these physical laws, and they play a role. But we also have metaphysical laws because, for example, for me to exist right now, something is grounding me in existence. Well, it's my heart. My heart is being grounded by my brain. My brain is being grounded by the oxygen that's existing. And so all we're saying is that synchronically at this time, in order for me to exist, there has to be other things that are more fundamental than me. If I get rid of one of these things, I will cease to exist. And all I'm saying is, in this argument, we're just doing that process. I exist because of my brain, because of my heart. My heart exists now in the here and now because of my brain. My brain exists in the here and now because of the oxygen grounding it in some way. The oxygen exists because of the trees. And you just keep on going down the level. And all I'm saying is that when you get to that sort of bottom level, which is the thing that we should identify as being the absolutely fundamental entity? I'm saying the argument, given the criteria, is God. Others might say it's something else, but it's weighing it. At the end of the day, we're in a pursuit of truth. So let's weigh the arguments. That's what I'm saying. If we assume the criteria, let's weigh the arguments to see which one has better explanatory value. That's what I'm saying. So for the second point, the interesting thing, though, again, with this definition of God as a trope, it actually changes the conversation because that mind-body problem you have, or this physical and non-physical entity, sort of interacting, you have a problem because you're postulating something which is, you would say, it's non-concrete in a way because there's this entity that is a spirit that is interacting with our world. How does that happen? But postulating the existence of a trope, tropes are assumed to be entities that can stand in certain relations. So that argument is not even there to be had because you're already postulating things which we already say, yeah, they are operative in.
It's because it's under all powerful. It's under the.
All I've done is just shaved off the limits of the power of this trope. That's all I've done. Shaved off the limits of the power and said that's the same thing. So you're committed to this thing called tropes. I'm shaving off the limits of this trope I'm postulating because it best explains the data. And that's all I've done. I'm not postulating something completely out of our peer view of knowledge and things like that. Yeah.
Oh no.
All right, let's let Jim get the last word in. So Jim, wrap it up for us. What you guys say, and then Dr. Sijuwade. Let's go.
No, I owe it to Dr. Sijuwade. Let him have the last word. I just appreciate him being patient with me. I enjoyed the conversation.
And thanks.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really, really happy about pushback because I think that's how philosophy should be done. It should be trying to clarify things and be as clear as possible in your argumentation. Because at the end of the day, I'm not in for apologetics, which is the idea that you got to come to my viewpoint, blah blah blah. Philosophy of religion is really trying to say what justification do we have for this thing that we are looking at, and I think you guys have been great in doing that. And
I love your style. I look, philosophy of religion is one of my weakest areas next to philosophy of mind. I have to dislike analytical philosophy. So
Same.
I mean, philosophy of religion is hard. But I like the way you approach it. I like the way you articulate yourself. I like the fact that you come on and you talk to us plebs about these particular topics, which shows that you actually enjoy the topic. And I love metaphysics. I like philosophy, and I know Jim. He likes it too, an awful lot. But these are
I have a love-hate relationship with it.
Yeah. So, but I did send you a message on your Facebook thanking you, and I wanted something else you can maybe help me with later on if you have time. But anyways, my voice is still shot, so it'll be gonna like take us out.
All right, last minute
wrap
updates
up.
for the channel. The Discord will be open and available to our guests, as well as opened publicly on the 14th of February, which will be Steve's birthday. So please like and sub and hit the bell so you get notifications when that becomes available. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, and membership and Patreon benefits will be out ASAP. We hope to see you around soon. The next one we have is going to be Cindy Lincoln talking about her experiences with Kent Hovind, and I hope to see you all there. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.